Hello, hero. It's Lucy Lannon. It has been some time now. Permit me to preamble, just for those of you who've been following along at home. If you have, and if you've been expecting content from me because you're already subscribed, firstly, thank you. And also, I apologise for the interim period. Between when I last uploaded, which I believe was February of 2020, oh, what a whippersnapper I was, and now, there has been something rather big happening in the world, which you may have noticed. I have systemic intersecting problems which affect my oxygenation. So I was on the list of people for whom, if I caught the Rona, it would be particularly bad news. Now, whatever it is that you believe politically, spiritually, astrologically, whatever is going on in a more extended sense, I kind of followed the guidance of my medical practitioner on that. And I still feel actually that it was correct to do so. So I was shielding from then up until pretty much now. I don't live much differently to how I started to at the beginning of the pandemic when it was like full lockdown. All of which means that as well as, trying to protect my fellow man by wearing a mask outside, even if all it protects them from is their own anxiety, I think that's valid. As well as doing that kind of stuff and getting vaxxed and all the rest of it, I also stayed in one place and in four walls for those 2 years, and that meant that I was away from filming equipment, from an atmosphere of confidentiality, and from a place where there wasn't ambient background noise. So I was quite literally unable to do this for you guys, although I did continue reading in some capacity just for other practitioners and stuff like that, just not on video. So yeah, it's been a real Saturnian and Plutonic descent. It's been a big initiation for me. I had to get real bored. I had to get extremely real with myself about what my goals for this channel and for the business and everything were. And sort of amend things as I went. So probably my overall demeanour and reading style will have shifted if you saw the last couple of videos from what I was like then. And hopefully I'll have improved a lot as well, because my confidence has gone up and I've done a lot more in that time. Although I've been reading consistently for, over a decade anyway, I've done a lot more readings pertaining to the situation that we've been in, and thus to kind of more dire circumstances than I might normally deal with. And I've also had a lot more opportunity to deal with magical practitioners and ritual guidance and stuff like that. So if that's relevant to you, you might want to subscribe and just keep your eyes peeled, because that's something I'm going to speak more about, I think. When I started this way back when, I was thinking of doing a tarot channel, and I had a shop open on Fiverr and stuff, but I wasn't really willing to talk about the rest of my spiritual life, being a folk practitioner and that kind of stuff, or indeed any of the insights that I've gained from the different medical nuances that I've been through over the years, and for walking very closely with death. And isn't she a lovely lady? But I think the biggest thing to come out of this pandemic really for me is that I now know not just what I'm willing to speak about, but what it is my job to speak about, if you get my drift. So yeah, expect a lot of content, a lot of different content. If you are interested in booking privately with me, the Etsy shop link is down below. Obviously that does pertain to the content of today's reading anyway. But if you just want to subscribe or you just want to click like, it's all appreciated. And I am sorry if you've been waiting on my ass. It's not intentional, I promise you, but it is beneficial. So, first thing to say is about the tag TBYB. So any reading from me that you see on YouTube with that particular acronym is going to be a try before you buy of something I'm offering in the Etsy shop. That doesn't mean you're under any pressure to purchase from me if you're watching it. It's just for those people who are likely to purchase tarot readings and want to see my style as a reader, want to see the layout of different kinds of readings that I do, because everything I do is kind of unique to my shop and designed by me. So it'll give you an idea of that stuff without getting into the level of detail that we would get either in a private capacity, i.e. one-on-one instead of one-on between 3 and 10,000, like general reading style, or sort of in the sense of extended readings, where I would often offer a lot more detail, a lot more clarifiers. I mean, you can see the card layouts in the Etsy shop images anyway, to get an idea of how much bigger an extended is each time. For this one in particular, we'll be looking at one particular situation or circumstance with this reading. If you were to purchase an extended, it would be 3, and then we would look at the holistic relationship between them all, any common themes, that kind of stuff. So you get the idea, but TBYB is just try before you buy, which is literally just try me out, see if you like me. If you don't, that's cool. I'd rather you didn't tell me. Actually, no, I'd rather you did if it's constructive. One thing I will say on that is that I do swear. I'm not going to apologise for that, because I don't personally believe that it inhibits my ability to articulate effectively, or indeed to channel. But I understand that there are people who differ on that and who can't abide swearing at all, and take the term curse word very literally, in which case I would say, be gone from this channel, I wish you well. Best wishes, but flee now before you are mortally offended. And in terms of everything else, like the kinds of cards I'm using, I know fallen angel oracles won't be for everyone, I know fairies won't be for everyone, I know some of the new age terms that are used in general readings won't be for everyone, I know some of you are atheists and skeptics and just see it as a lovely thought experiment, and I welcome all of that. I welcome all people. I really do read for everyone, from every kind of background and religious affiliation. So just understand that this is the most general you're going to see of me. And again, if you book privately, that kind of stuff will be tailored to you, right? So in the traffic light reading, we start with a traffic light card, which will tell you to stop, get ready, or go. And then the rest of the reading will explore, well, in what way and why, and what will happen if you do or if you don't. And then we'll have a keyword which sort of hones in on that, and the tarot will, get as a further result. And then we've got the Fallen Angel Oracle cards, the Black Moon Astrology cards, and the Brian Froud Fairies Oracle to act as further clarifiers. Now, in every personal reading I do, I also have crystal clarifiers, which are just the ones that call out to me as being part of the table setup before we start, right? And in this particular one, I think it's pretty interesting, because rather than picking from piles, I picked for all 3 piles. So you guys are, there's not going to be a whole lot in common between 3 different factions of people receiving a reading. And yet, we have almost all amethyst. All of my amethyst wanted to play. This one here is Chonky Boy. You may remember him if you've watched my readings before. But he brought all of his amethyst prana, right? There's absolutely everything I own here, which makes me think that either you've been working with amethyst or that it would benefit you to try if you're a crystal person. If not, consider it ambience and move on with it, right? But amethyst is great for making a crucial decision, levelling your mood out, particularly if you're dealing with anxiety, releasing any kind of selfishness or blocks around compassion, hormonal rebalancing, treatment of parasites, inner, outer, physical, metaphysical, you do you, sobering up in any kind of a way. And when I recorded this previously and had a bit of a failure on the camera, right? And when I said sobering up, and I started to clarify, and not just in terms of alcohol and drugs, I malapropped the word food into there. So for anybody who's having any issues with food binging or food disorders or anything like that, amethyst might be your bag. Do look it up though, because for some things it will increase appetite and for some things it will decrease them. I'm not entirely sure which one amethyst does, whether it's a suppressant or whether it instigates appetite. So obviously not appropriate for everybody, but do look into that. And obviously for those of you who are like me and kind of pop culture obsessives, Amethyst is about healing and unifying the dark crystal and the beings of Thra. So on a personal level, it reminds me of the kind of ethics of Jim Henson, if you like, who's a man that I very much admire. And it also makes me think of the balance between things. You know, you've got this skeksis, my hand becomes this Uru, so my hand, right? And it's perspectivism. It's this kind of, do you receive this as a blessing or do you receive it as a curse, right? So anybody who's thinking about those kinds of issues, I would say, from my perspective, amethyst is great for that too. We've also got selenite, which is very lunar and great for clearing, banishing and illuminating. So hopefully we'll get some good answers today. Quartz, just to amplify everything because they're good all-rounders. And then this, asked to be present. This is, let me just see whether that's on cam. This is my Saint Winifred from my altar. I don't normally include altar objects in my lineups, but hey ho, it's relevant for somebody. Don't know whether you've been working with her or it's just the name or what, but Winifred wanted to jump out, so there we go. Okay, so Aquarian Tarot, Smith-Waite Tarot, Tarot of the Divine, Pile 1, Pile 2, Pile 3. I will shuffle on camera just because I know some of you have, quite rightly, a problem with pre-shuffled piles and kind of pre-decided readings, so I want to prove to you that it's live, but I'll speed up that process because we ain't got all day, and I'll also give you a timestamp of kind of when that's done, and I've already sat with the cards and meditated, so that you can just skip to when I'm talking. So, see you in a sec. Well, it seems it's pile 1 now. So, pile 1, you will need to stop. And your keyword, which will make more sense in time, is abundance. Okay, first, woo! Did you see that? That's me standing up too quick. The first thing to say is that was a more scattered shuffling process than I am used to. The second thing is that this felt incredibly uncomfortable during, and that is not the usual thing. Please excuse my nails, I know they're terrible. This is a ring, I believe it's brass. It's from an ex of mine. Don't know whether that's relevant, but it just felt too tight, too constricting, right? It's too, so if that's something you've been feeling, this is 1000% your pile. Yeah, I'm going to just sit with your cards for a minute and I'll be right back. Alright, pile 1. You think you got this sussed out. I promise you haven't. Even aside from that thing with the ring, right? I know your keyword is abundance, but let me tell you, this is a love reading. If you weren't expecting that, and I sense that you probably were, but if you weren't, this is not your pile. You've been receiving very mixed signals or you think you've been receiving very mixed signals, or you want to have received very mixed signals. So you've interpreted them potentially as more mixed than they are with love. And this is your call right now to stop ruminating on this, to stop waiting for it to work out, and to move forward. Now, why do I say all this? I'm not just attacking you. I'm in a similar boat myself. If I had to pick a pile, it would probably end up being this one, she says with some croakiness and shadow in that already ventilated voice. Okay, so firstly, in this realm, which is kind of, what's this in relation to? What do we need to stop, right? I'm going to sit down because I'm too close to the camera. Okay, so we're over here. There's a resistance to an ending here. That's the first thing to notice. And there could be a comeback. There could be a kind of victorious rejuvenation. Not of the relationship, I hasten to add. This is on an individual level. You could be coming back real strong, but instead, all of this is being watched over by your Knight of Swords. Now, this can be any gender, doesn't have to be a knight, although I imagine this will be particularly resonant if it's someone on the younger side, male and or fair, whatever that means to you in terms of complexion. That may be fairer than a particular, the fairest within a particular race, or it may mean like fair, like white-haired, white-skinned, really pale. But those are just kind of extra markers. So if I'm talking about a woman and she's really dark, it kind of makes no difference. This is just going to resonate with some people who needed that kind of proof. But yeah, there's been an ending. I dare say a breakup, or at least a ghosting, or a series of miscommunications garbled enough collectively to form an indication that this is where this stops now. And you're not listening. I love you. I hope all the best happens for you. I believe you're capable of great love. For now, this is not it, right? And maybe for the future, this is not it, because we've got some interesting stuff happening with why it is that you haven't given this up. So, okay, death in the reversed. Firstly, it's a major arcana. The only times that you've got major arcana is in what this stop traffic light is saying put an end to now. So you've got the urgency turning up there. And then you've got urgency turning up again in, okay, what happens if I don't do that? And with you having Uranus here, I suspect that one of your recurring attitudes is, well, yeah, but what if I don't want to? What if I don't want to do that? What happens if I don't? You're testing the waters consistently with things, and it may not even just be in this sphere of your life, because generally when we're practicing this in one particular area and it's blocked in some way, it tends to transfer over to other things. So the general picture of you right now might be of someone with their hand on their hip, stood there going, well, what if I don't want to do that? What happens then? What are you going to do? And as a reader, I ain't going to do shit, love. You can do what you want. But if you want to know the truth, it's a bad move to keep holding on to this, to keep ruminating, to keep indulging in it. Now, the Ten of Swords in reverse, as well as this kind of comeback energy of like you could be turning this around if you weren't resistant, right? As well, it can be about martyrdom. It can be about the position of placing yourself in victimhood, because if you didn't do that, the truth would be a lot to take. I'm speaking to myself as well as you, so please don't take this too badly. But I think that something that's happened in this relationship or communication with another person is that they've done something you really don't like. They've potentially done a series of things you really don't like. And rather than take accountability for the fact that you kept showing up to see if they would do differently, or you kept showing up thinking that you had such power over the situation that, in fact, it was all going to turn around, or whatever, this is something you don't want to acknowledge to yourself that you've done. This is why you're needing to hear it from me that you've even done it. Right? You did keep showing up for this person. I'm here to tell you that you are at least as complicit in the... I notice these have been knocked out of the way, and these are my kind of masculine-feminine balance. It doesn't mean you have to be in a compet bullshit scenario. It just means that the dynamic of one partner to another is relevant here, and it was out of balance. Anywho, yeah, so you're complicit in this situation. You are very much a part of it. The traffic light is aiming at you. We're not pointing at their car. We're not telling them what to do. We're not even saying that what they're doing is going to block the safety of others. But we are telling you, urgently, in neon, that you need to stop with this. That you need to disengage from it. The Knight of Swords as a character, whatever character you've been dealing with, is very impetuous. They're very good with the words. They rush in. They perhaps move too fast. They're very eloquently charming, shall we say. They can use their mouth to get into your knickers, not in a rude way of that. I just realised what I said. But yeah, they sort of can talk their way around anything, and it seems to me that they've been neglecting you repeatedly. They've been offering you half measures. They've been potentially saying things that are quite hurtful, and then they've come back in some way with words that you have known on some level aren't really sufficient, but you've chosen to take them as being an indication of future sufficiency, of future promise, of, oh, well, they mean well, and eventually they'll turn around, or they're trying their best, or maybe I'm being too much, maybe I'm being too picky, my standards are too high. No, they're not. This is as hard for me to tell myself and hear as it is for you to hear. Your standards are not too high, they're playing you. I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing with you, because I know how it must be to receive this message, because I'm sort of almost telling myself as well. You've taken this, and you want to present to people that you've taken it lying down. You want to tell people that you just have so much faith in this person and their inherent goodness, that you've taken this lying down and you've accepted it all, and you've taken one beating after another. Please not physical. If they've literally physically beaten you, get the fuck out. Don't even watch the rest of this reading, just escape, seriously. But, you know, metaphorically, for the rest of you, you've taken one beating after the other, and you want to project an idea, because Swords is also about what you show people on social media and in the words that you choose with your friends. You want to give the impression that all of this is because you're such a good person, and you're just waiting for them to shift slightly, because you know, with your deep intellect, you know that they can change and that everyone is capable of change. And to an extent, that's true. To an extent. Everybody has it in them to be a better person. Some people do not choose that for a long time. How long do you have, pile one? How long are you willing to take what you know deep down to be less than satisfactory treatment from another individual? And for some of you, it may not even be romantic. I'm getting a strong romantic vibe, but because this is general, for one or two, it may just be someone that you've sort of been at odds with, had a bit of that martial energy around. But either way, they know that they're not giving you what you deserve. You know that they're not giving you what you deserve. They choose to keep giving that amount, to keep hurting you, and to charm your way their way around it a bit with words to sort of excuse what they've done. That's their shadow. You probably already know that. What you might not be as aware of is that you choose to play the victim on this, to tell other people that you're giving them the benefit of the doubt out of kindness, when actually it serves you to be in a position of martyrdom in relation to this communication. Because while ever you're getting sympathy from other people, reassurance from other people, perhaps even guidance as to whether to continue this, that you can then argue with and say, no, I believe in my value system that I should. While ever you're getting that extra attention, you can stop yourself from a development that needs to occur within you, and that is a lonely and solitary process. And a large part of the reason that you're avoiding it, I suspect, is because you know it's heartbreaking, and you know it's a lot to bear. So you'd rather tell other people that you're giving this person, whoever they are, another chance, because you see the light in them and because you're a spiritual being, or because you see potential in them for change, than you would admit to yourself that the real reason you're stalling on this is because if you didn't stall, you would have to develop. There would have to be a death. Not a literal death. There would have to be a part of yourself that you lose and that you grieve over. Now, we're used to talking about grief in relationships in terms of grieving the loss of a partner. And I suspect there's a very high likelihood that with this particular person, if you stop taking their shit, if you stop giving more room to what they're doing, if you were to, say, delete them or block them, instead of just kind of being present for them and waiting on it, they would disappear. And that is one element of grief in this, and this is why you have a grief card down here. But the grief that I think is actually more pertinent to this, and that's indicated by your astro cards very strongly, you couldn't get a stronger message, is the loss of the self that you would have been if this had worked out. You are sadder about losing your potential within this relationship or this dynamic or this working relationship or whatever it is. Even if it's your potential as like a family man, or your potential as somebody who's really great at the job and gets on with everybody, whatever, right? But I suspect, like I say, for most of you it is relationship. You are more upset about losing that potential of being such and such a person alongside this Knight of Swords than you are about actually losing them. And your first stage to empowering yourself to stop whatever engagement it is that you're having with this is to admit to yourself that the thing you're stalling on is losing a part of you, and that actually that stall being your main reason, your major arcana reason, kind of indicates that your attachment to them is not as strong as you thought that it was. Or their value for your future life, your future self, their meaning in your life, at least for the present, is not enough of a strong energy to be the main reason that you're avoiding this. This is a journey that's about you, make no mistake. Although relationships are coming up, it's about your attitude to what you can receive and what you must give in order to receive that thing. Abundance talks about money, yes. It talks about wealth in the kind of greater gratitude sense. But in this reading, it's talking about how much it is that you feel you can take in. For some of you, you're having problems with food and nourishment. You literally can't take in from the outside, from your immediate environment, the nourishment, read love, that you need to exist. You can't process it. You won't accept it. Or you're overfeeding because you feel that nourishment isn't there. For those of you with possible, eating disorder tendencies, please consult a medical practitioner and not me. I'm just speaking in terms of your reading. But those of you who abstain from food for long periods, this is about the refusal of love in some way, and it will go back to something that you felt you couldn't receive, or a way that you felt more in control if you refused the love and kinship of other people, and that eventually developed into a behaviour that seemed unrelated. For those of you who have trouble with purging food, be that through vomiting or exercise, I know this is really sensitive, I'm really sorry. That is about, I take in what should nourish me, and I am so unable in my own head to accept it and process it that I throw it back out into the world and say, look, is that sufficient? Is it? I'm laughing, not out of a lack of sympathy, but because I've dealt with some of these issues myself, very recently, in fact. And particularly with bulimia, I urge you to look into the archetype of the Furies. What truth, what anger in yourself are you banishing? How are you stuffing that down with food? How are you telling it to shut up? Telling your own truth to shut up by numbing, by binging, right? And then being so angry at that entire process, at that lack of love inherent in what should be nourishing, that you're chucking it back up out to the world, so that you're showing your own face the fury that you have. You're showing your own face the lack of nourishment that you feel. And if that's triggering, I urge you to fucking get help. This reading is your sign to get help. Speak to somebody, preferably a professional, who can actually talk to you about why it is that you feel you can't process that nourishment. Why it is that you feel that you're so like... Excuse me, I'm hiccuping. That's a bit of a sign for me as well. You're so sort of resistant, right? To being receptive to this kind of stuff, for whatever reason, probably in childhood, that you're like vomiting what should be nourishing, so that you're looking at it with your own eyes as a kind of, look, we're still here. The anger is still here. The problem is still here, right? All of that stuff you tried to absorb just then can't be processed within your body. You can't be, even if people are giving you love, that state of bulimia is representative of you can't actually take that out of it and receive it. And that's not to do with them. It's not to do with a lack of love. It's to do with blocks in receptivity, in abundance. For those of you who might have trouble with binging, overeating, obesity even, again, I don't feel the nourishment in this, so I'm just going to pile it on. I'm just going to hoard it as much as I possibly can until something good comes out of it. Maybe you're hoarding objects as well. Maybe you're hoarding relationships. Maybe you're hoarding connections. It's quite often a pattern. But in anything to do with abundance, food does tend to come up. So, if that section's not relevant, fair enough. But, it's outside is inside, yeah? And please do seek help if any of those are coming up for you. But seek the kind of help that deals with things like CPTSD, as well as whatever it is that you need to be helped with in terms of the eating proper, if you see what I mean. So yes, go to the disorder clinic, but also see someone who's a specialist in emotional issues. Because for you, this is very much tied into nourishment and tied into love, perhaps even parental love. And that might go back even further than you remember in terms of problems or deficits or issues of control there. Sorry, I'm needing to take a breath. This is very heavy. I did not expect this from a traffic light reading. Whew. So we know that you have this problem with receptivity, with the relationships that you think you deserve, based on the person that you perceive yourself to be right now. My self-concept readings, incidentally, might also be useful. That's not a push to purchase for me if you can't. But there is something going on here with, I don't want to let go of the image that I had of myself that correlated with being with or being friendly with this person, being made up with this person. I can't receive or I can't imagine that I can receive love outside of this very particular dynamic. Because if I'm not this person that receives it from there, who am I? One of the things that people really struggle with grief, particularly grief work to do with lost selves, is this idea that, like, okay, but once that's gone, what now? It's not even necessarily the loss of the thing that hits hardest, it's this idea of, well, who am I then? You need to start to decide who are you then. Because that's how you're going to stop indulging in victim mindset, in martyrdom behaviours, in self-harm to do with food and stuff like that, or in intellectual self-harm. Swords are, for many people, about the mind, so that follows. So, to take my after-school special a little further, I'll shift my bum, and let's get over to this. What happens if you don't take this action? Well, I can tell you that on the surface of it, you'll feel very happy. That might surprise you for me to say after I've warned you off a particular outcome. But this is a kind of self-delusion process that I see happening. Judgment is about a call to something. It's about feeling that something is vocational or fated. The Wheel of Fortune is about fate, purpose, destiny, twin flames. The Two of Rods is about ambition, aspiration, looking forward to something shifting, looking always forwards to the future. But notice that in this guy looking forward to the future, to fate, to purpose, to destiny with this person, the actual person is looking in the other direction. They would be more interested in the self that exists once this has died off. Not that their interest should be of any real note to you at this point, because this reading is about you. But for the record, if you don't go with this, they're going to be looking the other way anyway. And you will start to delude yourself, potentially with tarot readings, potentially just by other means. You will tell yourself that you've been called to this person. You will tell yourself that you're fated, that you're meant to be together. You'll tell yourself that the things that they've done to you, which are not cool, and that you don't deserve, and that are not an abundant relationship to love and nourishment, are in fact indicative of their point on the twin flame journey, or in some other process of remediation, reunion, recovery, you name it, that they're somehow justified in doing that, and that it'll all switch around as soon as there's a turn of the wheel. When that will happen, well, you don't know. I don't think it will. I think if you don't get out of this now, the energy of you not getting out of it is something that will influence the circumstances that it's in. And I believe that that will mean that actually you don't come together at all. Because you will be lost in fantasy land about what will happen when this person returns to you. About what will happen when they see suddenly that they've been a douchebag. Again, no gender to douchebag. But I think that you're deluding yourself, quite honestly. And I didn't want to get into a reading that deals with everything from eating disorders to convincing yourself that the other person's in love with you to, what happens if you don't let the old self go. I really didn't think that that would be the scope of this reading. To be quite honest, I thought the traffic lights would be quite light. But here we are. I think you will always be looking to the future if you don't let this stop now. And that's not to say that if you did let it stop, it will never happen, right? I suspect it probably won't, because you need to shed this cycle of believing in it to your own detriment. And I want to make a point here, actually, that believing in things like twin flames, believing in fated connections, believing in relationships between family, between friends, co-workers, that will work themselves out when the other person is repaired, that's all fine, right? There's nothing inherently wrong with those things. But where it becomes a problem is where you use that in a masochistic way, where you know that this relationship, in some sense, is a source of harm for you, and you continue to consensually engage in it, and therefore it becomes self-harm, which is what this talks about. So if all the food stuff went over your head, and you think, well, that isn't me at all, know that what I'm talking about is an engagement with your capacity for love and nourishment and receiving in general, right? That kind of passive, seductive, receptive energy that is so important, just as important as giving out, that is in some way flawed and in some way masochistic and self-harming. And I think not only will you go deeper into the cycle of self-harm, which was very evident over here, but it's important to know that you will delude yourself to the idea that this is not happening. Your drug of choice will become this relationship or this dynamic. And that is an awful place to be, because then all kinds of other behaviours, some of which we've talked about, start to play into it, and you start to self-soothe in really unhealthy ways, and you kind of forget in the end that the cause was that this thing is not fulfilling you, and you could just as easily step away from it, whether that's for a short period or forever. I don't even think at this point you need to decide whether it's forever. I think you need to resolve to yourself that it's at least what you consider to be a decent chunk of time. Be really honest with yourself with that. If that means months or years, you absolutely need to go with your first instinct. You can't just say, oh yeah, I believe this tarot reading, I'm not going to engage with this person, and then leave it 3 days and then you're back. That's not going to work. Because you're not doing this to affect the outcome with them. You're doing it to recondition yourself that you deserve more than you've been getting. Does that make sense? I'm sorry it's so heavy. But there is a great deal of transformation that could happen from this. This is literally, I don't know whether you can see, but it's the card of transformation. And it's a 27, which adds up to a 9, which for those of you inducted into tarot is hermit energy. So you're doing this by yourself, you're going within. Horse energy also, which ties to the hermit in some traditions. There needs to be a massive change here. And it's not actually with them. I think whatever you do, they're going to behave the same way. And it's not within the scope of this reading, or indeed within my inclination, to be quite fucking honest, to figure out why it is that they do what they do, why it is that they behave the way that they've been behaving, off and on, giving you breadcrumbs, giving you little promises, sweet words, and then acting like a complete, the rest of the time. I don't much care why they do it, nor should you at this point. They've been doing it long enough that it's not cool anymore. And you can have compassion for somebody at a distance. If you know, for instance, that they're on some kind of recovery journey, or if they're having a problematic time or whatever, you can absolutely be there for them energetically, in prayer or whatever it is that you believe is the most effective, without being present. But wherever you've got presence and engagement with this, you are risking yourself. There isn't a greater price that you can pay. You can't even see to other people unless you're seen to. Oxygen mask, remember? I know it seems like, I should give them the benefit of the doubt as a spiritual person. And in many cases that's true. But this reading has arrived specifically to tell you that in this case with this individual, right now, continuing to engage equals self-harm. It equals self-sabotage. You are breaking a promise that you made to your inner self to let go of the idea of whatever it is that you thought you needed to be or thought you might flourish into being alongside this person. And it's really crucial for you that you decide what's left. Who's underneath? Who were you before all this? Cast your mind back to before you even met them, never mind before you had this conversation. And if they're family, cast your mind back to times that you've lived separately from them or independently from them in some way. Who were you then? Because there will be a very nourishing, very, what's the word? A vivid and varied kind of cornucopia of selves that you managed to be in the absence of this person, and that you can be again, and I think you've forgotten. I think this is why this reading has to be heavy, and why I have to be quite sad doing it. I think you've forgotten who you were without them, and that's what you really resisted. It's nothing to do with whether they stay or go. It's nothing to do with whether they're alright with you, whether they think you're giving enough, whether every fucker else thinks you're giving enough, what all your mates weigh in on with it. Has nothing to do with that. This is about your relationship to yourself. There can be nothing more important. That's not narcissistic, that's not selfish. You have to see to yourself first. You can't be abundant if you don't have a sense of self that's separate from the cycles of giving and receiving. Yeah? If you don't have a consciousness separate from, say, money, nobody can give you money. And in the same way, if you don't have an identity that's separate from who you are around this person, you can't receive the unique gifts that they have that are separate to your identity from them. They can't complement you because they can't contrast with you. And in the same way, in a broader sense, if you don't know who you are in the world, it's much more difficult for the world to give to you exactly what you need, because you're likely to just kind of grab at anything, take in anything. This is what I mean in terms of this, like, overdoing it with connections as well. You can overeat people, right? And not just in sexual sense. You can have so many connections that you think will bring you something promising in the future that you end up losing the sense of who you were without all of those. And then you can't receive from them anyway because you don't know what you need. Figure out who you are and what you need. Uranus is a revolutionary figure. Genius is correct. He's great. I love him. He's also the Fool in the tarot if you do work with it. Also, this card is a 9. Again, hermit energy, doing it on your own, not with another person. There's a sense of personal revolution here. Pluto is also very revolutionary, but Pluto often requires a journey into the dark, into death, into Hades. And in an archetypal sense, that means the dark parts of the self. The bits that you don't want to acknowledge have a stake in being a victim, or have a stake in conflating their identity with another person, or have a stake in saying that they're in the spirit of forgiveness where actually they're in a state of block. Pluto will go down into the dark with you and hold your hand. It's a wonderful energy, but it's terrifying to a lot of people because it's big death energy. Death. And again, for those new to tarot and readings and stuff, that's not to say anything about physical death. You don't need to be scared someone's going to pop the clogs or something. Or free the horses. It's more about death of selves, or death of a cycle, or of a habit, or of a behaviour or a disorder. Yeah. So, revolution and revolution. This one with the accent of that kind of death. This one with more of an inclination towards individuality, humanitarian effort, technology. A lot of the spirit of our times, actually, kind of, it may benefit you to channel this revolutionary bit into stuff that you're doing online, because Uranian energy is very internety, for want of a better word. But it also is, with this word genius, it's recognising the genius in self. It's recognising where your strengths are, where you can be beneficial to the world outside of this situation. And we will get into something specifically to focus on that's nothing to do with it, because I think that's really a card that you in particular need. Okay, so the influences on this, like I say, these two are revolution. Let's have a nab at your fairy card. So your number 60, which is the Puck. Shape changer, good in bad, bad in good, paradox resolution. I will be reading from the book just because it's relevant. It is time for the resolution of seeming contradictions and paradoxes in the situation, some of them self-created, I imagine. Someone or some part of the situation is cloaked in confusion. Read all of this. And our muddled thoughts must be stripped away, revealing truth. We just need to think about the information we needed is now available to us. As soon as we have that burst of insight and we get it, it's time for us to make changes based on our new and clear understanding. It may be time for us to make a reality check on the good and bad labels we put on things. That's particularly relevant, actually, because this person isn't bad. I don't want you to frame them anymore as person bad, done bad thing to me, or situation bad, will be terrible if I stay. There is nuance. They probably are capable of change. They possibly are in some kind of divine connection with you. But the important thing is, that's not where the emphasis is placed, right? You need to push it back onto yourself. It doesn't matter whether they're good or bad, for you or for themselves. Yeah? If you're not in the habit of seeing the good in the bad and the bad in the good, having a preferred black and white world rather than one with colours, you may need some help in learning to do this well. Tarot can help you, divination in general can help you, but also just consenting to this process of transformation can help you. Surrendering is a huge theme of this reading, and actually a huge theme of receptivity and abundance in that sense. You're not just saying, I know I need to stop, you're saying, I know I need to relinquish all of the stuff I associate with this and give it up to life, God, fate, whatever it is that you believe that we're talking about here. And sort of say, I put myself in life's hands now. I give this over to God, for those of you who speak that language. Or for those of you who are more psychological, I surrender this part of my psyche and I allow healing to come in. Just saying that aloud to yourself or writing it down somewhere and burning it is a magnificent way to transform this energy. Because you're reinforcing through ritualistic action the kind of intention that you have for yourself that you're going to let this go. So moving over to this side. If you do take this action, yes, we've got heartbreak. Yes, we've got carrying more than you can immediately perceive yourself as handling. It will be a heavy load. It won't be an easy process. I'd love to tell you it'd be sunshine and roses as soon as you consent to doing this. I suspect that's not the case. I suspect that recovery will be a little bit of a step in the right direction, and then, oh shit, I slipped up, I checked the Facebook. Oh shit, I slipped up, I did send them a message on this day because it was a special day. Oh shit, I did, think about them and daydream about them all night yesterday because I was feeling a bit low. But the overall progression in one direction is what you must pay attention to. It's not about whether you're deciding to be right tomorrow, to fix all of this, to undo it all, to stop. It's about whether you can make headway in that direction, even if occasionally you slip up. Even if occasionally you get into sparring with them, into conflict with them. Because that can happen too. Especially with a very swordsy personality, they can drag you into conflict. Because at the minute, that's what they're about. Doesn't mean astrologically it's who they are or anything like that. It just means that they're in that energy right now. So they want to fight. They want to be impulsive. They want to rush into stuff. They want to just speak and speak and speak. Maybe not even to you. Excuse me, hiccups again. By crikey, I'm getting a lot of stuff. It's of no concern to you what this person's doing. It's not even really of concern to you how fast you're progressing in the direction of letting this go. What you can keep track of is your effort in that direction, and that it's consistent and that it's daily. For those of you who are a bit sort of type A and set SMART goals and stuff like that, and maybe even apply that to your spiritual life as well, I would urge you, if you want something to actually grab onto with this, something you can do in a very practical way, to ask yourself the question at the end of the day, did I move in the direction of letting go of this connection today? Or did I move in the opposite direction? And if you did move in the opposite, look at your week. Did you move in the right direction over a week, over a month, hell, over a year? That's what matters. It's not, did I say exactly this right thing, and did I cut off in exactly the right way at the right moment, and did I check that it was this time on the clock, and did I double check with this person that so-and-so's not going to be mad with me as a result of this connection? Bollocks to all that. It's nonsense. It's just kipple, right? You don't need to bother about all of this peripheral stuff. The thing to focus on, if you're a type of personality that needs focus, is, am I moving away from being treated like shit? By this person and anyone else. By myself also. And what you'll gradually come to, coming back to this theme of abundance, if you do manage to move away from this connection, and if you do manage to grieve for the self that was sort of tangled up in it, and unweave that little knot, or big knot, is a Six of Pentacles, which is about fairness. It's about people helping you back. It's about charity, but it's also about receiving enough that you can be charitable. Because the other thing you've been missing about whatever it is that you're giving in exchange to this person, whether it's your time, your attention, your energy, or words or deeds or whatever, is that in that giving mode, actually, you've become so depleted of resources because you're constantly in give and not in receive, you haven't made the switch, that you have nothing to offer that. You are so depleted in yourself that you couldn't give them what they need either. And that's not to blame you for this situation, because I do think they've acted like a shithead. Whatever it is that they've been doing, I'm getting a strong sense that they knew it wasn't cool, right? But what I will say is that if you're not applying your own oxygen mask first, there isn't a way that you could have been of use to them in their recovery, in their self-knowledge, in their love. Ooh, I made myself glittery. And you need to receive in order to be able to give to anybody like that, or with that relationship to you, right? You can't continue to be so giving without receiving at all. You just can't do it. You won't have anything in your battery. Abundance is a two-way thing. It's not just learning to attract things that you want. It's learning to actually let them in when they arrive. And it's not just receiving them. It's learning how to then use them so that you're always giving, knowing that you always have an infinite energy supply and an infinite abundance in order to be able to give, so that you can then be of service to the world. That's what this card speaks about on a deeper level. And for those of you who are called to spiritual service or anything like that, I'm getting that message because if this is my pile, then hello. You can't give adequately to other people while ever you're tangled up in giving without nourishment to this or any other person. It doesn't. The thing is that the scope of this reading starts with this interaction, but it doesn't end with it, right? This is a pattern that you have. This overgiving, or at least holding space for people who don't hold space in return, aren't present in return. Don't act like they care, to be quite honest. And you are always caring for them, and you always provide for them. And I think a really useful thing to ask yourself is why. Is it that I'm this infinite compassionate being? Is it that on some level I don't believe I'll be able to receive from them if I'm not seen to be that way? Is it that I don't feel worthy of receiving at all unless they can frame me as somebody who can give this specific thing that they needed? Am I in a way making up my gifts to them out of fear that they will leave if I'm not like enough of a thing? Because that's something to transform then. Transformation, transformation, transformation. It's something to alchemically transmute into something else. It is not true that you don't have enough to receive and deserve what you're receiving. It is not true that you don't have enough to offer another person without overgiving or without giving in a capacity that is not true to your nature and is more to do with theirs. But you have to learn about those relationships in this process of letting go in order to get to a place where you can receive, not just in general, but you can receive exactly what it is that you need, because you will know yourself enough to figure out what it is and to draw a line in the sand and say, you know, I'm looking for this. And if somebody can't give me that, they're not appropriate for me. And I relinquish them with joy and let them find something that is appropriate. And I also find something that's better for me. Okay, so last two cards. I'm sorry this is going on a while, and I'm sorry it's harsh, but some readings just go this way, I guess. Next step. The Empress in the upright. Again, it's about nourishment. Jesus. I hope you can see that. I can't actually see the top of my camera right now to know the angle. But in the upright, it would be about being the most abundant possible figure in the tarot, about giving. You see, she's got this harvest, right? She'd be giving out food, nourishment, care to everybody. She's the mother, right? To the entire tarot, to the entire community. She's also Persephone, so you've got this Plutonic underworld descent narrative going on for those of you affiliated, right? And it's this very Venusian energy, which again points to a love reading, but it's also this like, yes, it's mothering, it's feeding, it's caring. And when it's in the reverse and it's in the possession of next steps, it's almost like saying, don't care for anyone else for a bit. Don't feed anyone else for a bit. Feed you, care for you. Go into the underworld, hold the Empress's hand. Because she's the one who comes out of it, and when she comes out of it, it's spring, right? Life can start again. When she sets foot, she comes up back out of Hades, right? Having had this incredible journey with Pluto. And she kind of, as soon as she sets foot on the ground is fertile again. It receives that nourishment that she embodies, and everything can thrive again. So it's almost like this thing of saying, stop feeding anything. Cut off the supply. Cut off the drip feed. Cut off the response to the breadcrumbing. Cut off the engagement with the battles, be they verbal or otherwise, right? Even cut off from this martyrdom thing. Just don't engage with any of it, and you will find the way to turn this the other way up, and firstly nourish yourself, and then nourish the community. Because you've been putting energy into one person instead of into you and everything else in this beautiful world. And it is possible to be mothered and nourished and parented in general enough, and to have enough control and trust that you can be of benefit to absolutely everybody without depletion. That's another huge lesson of this. You're learning about what it means to be depleted, what that looks like for you, what behaviours you have when you are depleted, and how to then get to a point where you know that you're not, so that you can give in a much more generous way, and in a way that's in tune with you specifically and your gifts and your purpose. Something else to focus on. I think your other relationships need attending to be quite honest, because this in the reverse is often about elitism, and I'm seeing this gathering of roses. Now, roses are to do with relationship to the other or relational stuff. This is why they have the love association, but they're also family, friends. Even in an animist sense, they're like one being relating to another. It's the dialogue, which is why they have a lot of mystical connections and stuff, right? And it's also why they're appropriate for a swords card. So when you're reversing this energy of dialogue with everything, you're talking about elitism, but you're also talking about sacred discernment. Now, what does that mean? It means going through your mates on social media and deleting people you've never met. Or who you know have bad vibes, and tell gloomy stories and encourage you to do the same. It means giving less to friendships that no longer give back to you, even if they're people from way, way, way back. It means having designated family time instead of having family cut into all things or work cut into all things, right? You can think of this sword as drawing a line in the sand. Again, self-concept reading but also boundary setter might be useful, but only if you feel called to it. I'm not pushing anyone to spend money. The important thing with this Queen of Swords is that you start to view all of your relationships in a broader way as a reflection of how much you give and receive and what your relationship to nourishment and love is like. So yes, you have a pattern with this person and they're very irritating and they've dicked you around for long enough. We've covered that. But what can that tell you in terms of how you showed up to it about how you show up for everyone else? Is there something you've been doing with this person that you know you do in other places? And you're like, yeah, shit, I probably shouldn't give that more attention than it's worth. Or I probably shouldn't give someone the benefit of the doubt after the second, third, fourth, fifth strike, right? That's not to be dispassionate, by the way. It's not to be selfish, and we don't want to fall into the shadow of elitism. What we want to do is take the positive of elitism, which is discernment, and say, where in my relationships have there been echoes of this dynamic here? Because the wisdom of those of you who did identify with twin flame stuff and are now seeing that that's like almost a mechanism to keep yourself in an abuse cycle with this, the big wisdom, the reason that it seemed such a significant connection, not denying that it is one of those, but we'll see, but the reason it had such importance for you right here and right now is that it illuminates the ways that you've been behaving with everyone you relate to. People don't come into your life in isolation. They're always reflective of you, or of the way you relate to other people, or of your circumstances as a whole, sort of summed up in a person, or of the energy you're putting out. All kinds of stuff. You never just meet someone and it doesn't fit with anything else that's happened to you, if you see what I mean. And for this connection in particular, the reason it's had you on your knees is because it is so significant. Not in what it can do for you in future self, in this like fantasy self that you've had, but in what it can illuminate in how you act with other people and where you can retreat, take back some time for yourself, or where you would be better to give your energy. Because it's likely that there's been a misattribution, there's been an energy management problem in giving to this person, even just in your thoughts and feelings and over rumination, and therefore not having that in place to offer to somebody who does deserve it, to somebody in your life that is always there, to people that support you, that bring you joy, that help your development along, that nourish you, yeah? You're seeing where this food and nourishment theme comes in. Big Cancerian vibes. I have a stellium there, so I'm with you. But a lot of this is about mothering and nourishment. And I hope you can see why and understand why. Please comment down below if you're getting that connection and you see how love and food and abundance and giving and social media and all of these things all interrelate in the end. I hope it really was useful for you. If you'd like something more elaborate or private, you know the links down below, that's fine. If you don't want to do that and you feel like you want to give me something in the way of saying thank you for this because it has been helpful, then I'd take a like, I'd take a subscribe and a bell, or if you'd like to abundantly give your money with discernment mind, there is a link to a PayPal donation button, so you can toss me 50p or a quid or something just to say, hey, that was useful, cheers. And if you don't want to do any of those things, that's absolutely fine. Hey there, pal 2, Smith-Waite Tarot. Let us pick your traffic light and then we'll get to shuffling. Okay, so you also need to stop. And your keyword is beauty. Oh. Okay, I'll just take a minute to sit with your pile. I must say this is already a much nicer vibe than pile 1, so give me a second, we should have quite a pleasant reading on our hands. Pile 2. I suspect that if this is your pile, this is about an issue in a creative or work collaboration with one or more people, but I'm guessing that the sort of specifics of the reading are about a dialogue with one person in particular. Where it's been problematic, there's been little arguments, fights over what to do next. There is also like entrepreneurial energy in this, so it could be that you've collaborated with somebody to release a product or to produce like as a team without much of a kind of without the safety net of a corporation or a company or whatever. But either way, even if it is work for a company, it seems to be about a creative project or a work collaboration that is fraught. So if that's not something that speaks to you right now, this might not be your pile. But yeah, I suspect that there's strong creativity in it, right? There's this sense of, there's also Victorian energy. If you're very earth sign placement, this is it. But we also have Leo stuff. We have lots of Aries energy, by gum, and a little bit of kind of stuff to do with Pan and all that kind of area. So if that all pings off for you, then you're in the right place. Okay, let's get into it in more detail and then we'll get back to the sort of general sense of things, right? So you've been fighting. You've been trying to produce something for sale or for distribution, like a zine or something, which uses your creative capacities, which are different for each of you, I think, in the team, I mean, to produce something that other people will enjoy. I get that it's like potentially something that people are recreationally purchasing, not necessarily like something that you're offering to a company or that you're consulting on or whatever, but I could be wrong on that, so just take it as it resonates, because like I said, general readings. But yeah, there's been a conflict about the ins and outs of this particular thing. It's surfacing as a conflict between you and this other person as individuals, but my sense is that it's not actually about that, and that if you were to take the sort of finicky elements of production out of this, you would find two people who probably would get on. Whether or not you would sort of be inclined to meet each other outside of that context is up to you, but you know, I don't think that the problem is actually the way that you are in relationship to one another. I think that the issue is more about the ins and outs of what it is that you do next, where you go with this, how it's produced, and really specifically who it's produced for. That's a very strong thing, because we've got a lot of cups energy that speaks to imagining and projecting, but also observing and empathetic energy. Sorry, words. So you're kind of trying to see your target market and predict their inclinations, backgrounds, and how that might kind of accent what it is that they're receiving before you've almost finished deciding what it is that you want to do, right? And that has meant that you've rubbed up the wrong way against this other person who perhaps has very different ideas about how this is going to go. What I will say is that although you are kind of equally matched in many ways, and although I'm not taking sides in this, because in the end this is not about the conflict and who is right or wrong, or it starts there but it doesn't end there. What I will say in your defence is that it is clear that this person has been quite judgmental of your ideas and sort of shouts about it to either other people you work with or people that you're potentially interested in the opinions of. For some of you, I'm getting that there's been a bit of backbite-y, passive-aggressive shit on social media. For others, I'm just guessing that this is like you disagreed with them at work, so they went to a superior over your head without consulting you or even addressing the issue with you to see whether it could be resolved, right? This is them kind of trumpeting this idea to other people who are like, what? Give me all of this psychic conflict energy. I must know the gossip. Give me the tea. And really, these people won't have a huge effect, even if it seems like they will. I don't think they'll have a huge effect in the outcome of whatever this decision is. But I think the thing that's sticking out to you more than anything is that you are pissed off that this person has gone behind your back or over your head or sort of talked about it to other people in a way that doesn't necessarily paint you in a positive light. And that this has been more of an angle of character assassination than it needed to be, because it was inherently a disagreement on in a methodical sense, in the sense of how should this be produced and who for, not in terms of, is this a good person, is this a bad person, are they cool to work with, are they not cool to work with. And in the kind of trumpeting of these ideas that this other person had, it's become a bigger issue than it was, which has really fucked you off, and quite rightly. However, the reason your traffic light says stop is because you need to stop engaging in the conflict of it. That doesn't mean that you can abandon the project, obviously. It doesn't mean that if this is a financial endeavour and not just a creative one, that you can kind of throw your money to the wind and fuck it and chips fall where they may kind of thing. It's not what I'm suggesting in the slightest. But what I do think is that you can step away from the side of you that wants to continue in the argumentative energy that the other person is bringing, or in the vein of disagreement that has been happening thus far. I want you to step into more of a Page of Cups kind of energy, where you're approaching with a childlike, even if it's a persona, but a childlike vibe to this, right? You're coming with imagination, you're coming in with ideas, you're offering new creative solutions that nobody ever would have thought of. The fish in the percolator, for example, was fairly unprecedented. Hello. If that's of no relevance to you, then just let that one slide over your head. But for those who know, you know, right? And if it's a creative project, that may have some relevance in terms of your influences. I'm also seeing the sort of tulip pattern on this person's tunic. So there's this sense of like giving and of generosity. And because you've got this word beauty here, it's almost like, okay, we're getting back in this stopping of engaging in the conflict. We're getting back to the energy of what did we want to put out into the world? In what way? Even if it's a project that, like, you know, you work in an office and you're not that attached to what you do on an emotional level. What was the original purpose of you going into this? What made you find it, quote unquote, beautiful, right? Because tapping back into that and being the person who presents that, like your little cup, to the other person and being like, hey man, do you remember why we started this? Is really going to benefit you in diffusing this thing that they've got about, like, trumpeting to everybody about what dick you've been. And it might not be that extreme, and I don't want to kind of dob them in if that's not what they've done exactly. But if this is your reading, you're probably getting the vibe of, like, yeah, they've maybe consulted with some people they shouldn't have consulted with, or they've maybe, like, framed the idea in a way that wasn't quite what I said, and that sort of implies I'm a dick, even if it's not said, you know? There's certainly some kind of thing with that where it's like, it's not really where I was going with that, bro, but thanks anyway, you know? And this is managing to happen because you're in an environment, a field, or a market where this kind of conflict and this kind of backbiting, oh, give me the tea stuff is popular for the moment. I have to say, it's pretty prevalent everywhere, my dude. Even in spiritual circles, there's a lot of, like, negative tarot backbitey stuff about, like, ooh, who's jealous of you? And who wants to be the same as you in your glow up? And all this sort of, like, there's this weird aggressive energy running through things at the moment. So it could be, for those of you familiar with the, like, larger tides, that this has been sort of exacerbated by the fact that that's a current for now. But if all of that means nothing to you, or you think it's woo or whatever, let's just say that the environment that you've been working in, be that like a Zoom call or an office or whatever, is conducive to these kinds of disagreements and debates being dragged out a little longer than they need to be. So don't take it that this conflict is the be-all and end-all. I know it felt like a major issue because this is major arcana, that this person possibly consulted somebody else or said something behind your back, or there was a bit of water cooler bullshit. But I honestly don't think that it's as big a deal as you're feeling it is. And it's fair to be hurt by it, but I want you to resist the temptation to kind of outsmart this person, get revenge, be a bit spiteful, show other people around you that you're better than they are in some way. Like, all of that thinking, my dude, is just not going to do you any favours. It's just going to amp up your stress levels and take you further off the track of why it was that you started this to begin with, right? And whatever it is, it's creative, it's imaginative. Even if it's in the most mundane sector, you are bringing ingenuity to it that was the appeal of why you began. And that is the beauty that's being referred to here. You may laugh at the idea that I'm calling it beautiful, but there is a part of you, if you're listening to this, that knows that the reason you wanted to make or produce or whatever it is that you're doing is because there was an aspect of beauty in it to you, from what you could provide to it and what it provided in the world. There was some reason you got into this field, and indeed there was some reason you began with this particular person, whether you were assigned or whether you started a business with a friend or something. It's kind of, it makes no odds. There's a reason that they were the specific chosen person to do this along with you, and that still stands. No matter how frustrating it is that you can't see eye to eye on what's going on. We'll probably get more into why I think it's to do with your audience and to do with whether you're marketing in the right way to the right people, but let's just say it's a hunch, and let's kind of move across the spread and get into some other stuff. So I'm going to move my bum. Okay, so what happens if you don't stop engaging in this conflict energy, and if you instead go, no, I am right about this, and I'm going to continue to tell people that I'm right, or I'm going to go ahead and produce this particular component of the project without their say-so, or something else along those lines. Well, what will happen in that sense is that you will polarize this into being about this person's animalistic, kind of feral, backbitey, equally annoyed nature versus their capacity for compassion. You can decide how that's going to go. They might be somebody whose compassion wins out. But I kind of think you don't want to make this dualistic component come into what it is that you've got going on here. Particularly because with this infinity sign above Strength's head, I do get the sense that you could be working with this person for a long time, whether or not that's your decision. So, you know, either you started something that it's going to take a long time to undo and or finish, or you are literally in an office environment or something where you have to work with them and they could be there forever. So I would urge you not to divide this person into their kind of good and evil selves for the purposes of what is in the end a more minor argument about something which you both agree upon in the principle of why you're making it or doing it, right? You both agree on why you're providing this service, why you're doing the job that you're doing. So getting into like office politics type stuff about whether this person is conducting themselves correctly around it is only going to drag you, the project, and this other person, and possibly an entire team down, right? So that is what would happen if you kind of carried on, you didn't give up. I also see with this empathic figure here who's staring into the kind of minutiae of this very Baroque-looking cup or extension of the vessel kind of thing. The fact that you've got a capacity for empathy, for understanding your clients or your customers, or indeed just the service that you work for, whatever it is, right? You really get the knack of it, you get why it is that it's necessary, how it works, and you're very kind of clued into the micro mechanics of what it is that's going on here and what it is that needs to be done. You may even be in the right for that reason, because there is a great deal of expertise within this card. However, with this being in the section for if you don't stop this conflict, if you don't give up fighting with this person is also kind of lost in the minutiae. She's out at sea. The Queen of Cups can sometimes talk about somebody who's so overwhelmed by emotion that they're an island, that they're stranded in their own world of illusion and emotion and intuition and all of those things that can be lovely if they're in relationship to other people. I'm very much reminded of the kind of Turtle Island medicine wheel thing of emotions being the giving element, water being the giving element, and that if you can't give with your emotions, if you can't use your insight and intuition and expertise in that realm, even if it's just in terms of social engineering and stuff like that, if you can't use that to then be generous to others in some way and provide some kind of service or compassion for other people, then that energy becomes stagnant and it holds in that chamber of the wheel, and then you get all kinds of health problems, mental problems, you know, all sorts of difficulties you don't want to run into from the blocked emotional reserve. Now, in a creative work context, what that means is that, yes, you are insightful into both the product and others. Yes, what you said may have even been correct. Yes, you may empathise and understand, empathise with and understand this person and indeed any other people that you're involved with in a professional or creative capacity very well, but you can almost get lost in that. It can cause you to become stranded. Excuse me. A lot of the time when I'm getting insights, I get hiccups, so I do apologise if I make little noises. It's just part of it. It's kind of grown post-pandemic, I'm not really sure. There's a risk, if you continue with this battle, to be so lost in the ins and outs of the morality of it, or in what's really going on in under the surface of this person and in their personal life, and why they might be making this accusation, and who's watching you, and who's supporting you, and who's not, that you get made into an island, and you get stranded from the project itself, and from your original purpose, and from the beauty of the thing that you were doing, or indeed from being able to work in the most professional capacity possible, and being of use, right? It is possible to be so keen on the utility of what it is that we're doing that we end up being fucking useless because we're just ruminating on it, and we're just kind of throwing pebbles into this like deep emotional well, thinking, oh, what about this thing and what about that thing, and we miss our calendar kind of flying past us, right? It's possible to get too immersed in this, be it office politics or this relationship of individuation, or in preoccupation with who the customer is and not with getting the service to them fast. But that's the other component. If this is a project that has a particular timeline or has, an optimal time to be produced, are you risking missing that because you're staring at the minutiae of what is happening? This whole spread is moving from paying attention to the micro to understanding your position in the macro, and kind of stepping into a role that you wouldn't have understood had you just focused on the little finicky details of who's being snippy and who's not, and who agrees with this thing, and should it be this colour, and when is it out, and does it matter whether it's a Wednesday? You know what I mean? So, excuse me, that is my very squeaky sofa. So the other thing, if you kind of continue and you don't stop in this energy of battle and step into a more naive, childlike blossoming with ideas and creativity and, oh, actually, we're all friends here kind of energy. There's two interpretations of this. The first, I think, is appropriate for those of you who are working alone, and that is that the Page of Swords energy can sometimes indicate somebody whose speech and communication has a degree of immaturity to it, or is incomplete or unresolved. And I think that in some way, if you get bogged down with what's been going on, rather than with just getting something out there, finishing that part of the job, moving on with your life, expressing creativity into other things, you run the risk of a kind of stagnancy within yourself that means that you're not going to express this quite the way that you designed it. There may be a brief where there are words missing, quite literally. There may be component parts that don't turn up, production problems with missing a section of your audience that that it evolves to be quite significant for the result. There's just something not being communicated at the correct time, or something even not being released and disseminated when it was designed to be, or when is in right time in a broader sense, right? So you're missing a window if this continues. You're missing opportunities, but you're also not expressing yourself to your fullest capacity, and you're not representing yourself professionally or creatively as your best self. There's going to be bits of your gifts, your personality, that are like absent without leave in this case, right? Bits of you go off and do their own thing because they're too preoccupied with this shit. And what that means is that some people, some clients, some even some sort of future projects are meeting you when you're not at your complete self, Now, for those of you who aren't working alone and for whom office politics and stuff like that does resonate, like you're not in a one-on-one team, you're in a team, and you have superiors and stuff. Page of Swords can be talking about spying, right? So this is somebody watching, quite literally, this process of you getting too bogged down in this, too involved in the minutiae, and giving you, what's the word? This is so Page of Swords for me to get the word as I'm saying it, to forget the word as I'm saying it, sorry. Giving you like an unfair appraisal, an assessment of your abilities, which is based on them kind of watching your attitude to the people you work with, watching how you go forward with a project where there is some disagreement. And this can be, like, even in a broader sense, if you're just a team of entrepreneurs or something, and you're putting something out there, maybe the people receiving it in a like community social media sense are seeing somehow some hidden side of what's going on. You know, like a good example being like you're making a video with your friend on YouTube and there's some kind of shadiness going on there, and one of you gives a look to the other between statements that are rehearsed, and the audience pick up on it and they're like, this person doesn't seem like what they're presenting themselves to be. That is like spying in a broader sense, you know, it's this somebody watching over you. But for many of you, this is a boss. This is someone who's watching how this is playing out. You don't know that they're watching. And if you carry on in this kind of conflict energy, they're going to come to you and be like, your conduct here is fucked up. Whether or not it's you, right? It could be a whole team of people. See these birds in there in a group. But the person that is being isolated here is this page. And you've got a page here and a page there as well. So there's a need to act with some humility in this situation. It almost seems at odds with the second half of the reading, and you'll see why, but there is definitely a need to acknowledge that in some way, even if it's just the interpersonal dynamic and dealing with this particular person's issues, you are new to this. You are a rookie, right? So don't get on too much of a high horse with whatever it's about, or don't get too bogged down in the minutiae, and instead go, okay, so we disagree on that bit. What is it that we agree on? What is it that we can progress with today? Let's move it forward. Let's take it out of this energy of stuckness and go, okay, well, if we can't control this aspect, what can we control? What is it that we can focus on? And then maybe once that's kind of a little bit further along, we'll start to come to some agreement about the other thing, okay? So, influences on this particular thing. This is where we get a bit broader, right? You may think that in this influence section I'm going to talk about what's going on in this other person's life. You may think that I'm going to talk about product and audiences and what it is that is the right answer to this problem that you've had going on. No, my friend, you're here for a holistic tarot reading. Turns out that the bigger influence on all of this is that you need to learn not to be so finicky and not to fall into conflict with people who are high conflict, because actually there is a real current of leadership trying to come in for you specifically, and you need to step into doing what a leader would do. So what a leader wouldn't do is stand by the water cooler and bitch about the other person, or say, you know what, I think Steve was just totally off about this. What a leader wouldn't do is turn to a social media poll to say, well, they don't agree with me on this, so what do the audience think? What colour do you want it in? Right? All of these are very backbitey kind of energies. You don't want to do that, because what you're coming into is your North Node or life purpose. If any of you have, let me think, which North Nodes are leadery? So Leo North would be a great one, Aries, potentially a Capricorn North Node. I'm probably forgetting some signs, but this is not your sun sign for those relatively new to astrology. This is really specifically your North Node, but there is some element in your nodal dynamic that is to do with leading the way. Maybe even a Uranian influence for those who also were interested in pile 1, there is some of that in there, although it's a completely different kettle of fish, right? Or percolator of fish, if you will. So there is this current of leadership trying to come in. There's also revolution, and particularly with the solar aspect, it's again this Leo energy, speaks to the strength card, speaks to leadership, leading a team, being the person who first disseminates a product or thing. Think of the disseminating moon phase. It's like it's come to its fullness and now you're giving it out. You are the person to lead the way, to push the product out into the world, to birth it first, right? And then, like I was saying, the strong Taurus here, but this, again, more acts as a card of leadership, but it's also Taurian energy. And Taurus is about staying stubbornly in your convictions, that's remarkably hard to say, and kind of following through with what you know to be correct, but also being somebody who goes first. You know, you might, I feel like some of you relate to being like the muscle in any given team that you're on. Maybe you're bigger than the others, maybe you're a little bit tougher, maybe you're more direct. And it's possible that this person has kind of turned that aspect against you a little bit in the way that they've been bitchy and been like, oh, well, so-and-so would say that because they're the muscle, or it always has to be their way or whatever. But in the light, that stubborn Taurian muscle aspect, it's kind of Amos from the Expanse energy, is kind of knowing where to take stuff and being the first person to enter the room, the first person to push a product out, the first person to say, hey, guys, have we thought about doing it this way? Or indeed, in a conflict, the first person to say, hey guys, we don't agree on this, but can we think of stuff we do agree on so that we can make some progress today? And if you are being spied on by anybody a little bit higher up or very influential in your career, it is a really great quality to be able to diffuse conflict in that fashion and say, okay, well, what is it that we can do right today? Never mind the wrongs, never mind the negativity mindset, never mind backbiting at each other and he said, she said. What is it that we can make progress on? How can we be the most efficient right now? So I think really this is a call to concentrate on doing that in the spirit of why it was that you found this industry, this medium, whatever, to be beautiful in the first place, when you were just an imaginative whippersnapper back when you started out, right? The Piper is an interesting one. I am going to read from the book on the Fairies Oracle because it's always insightful. But instantly what I'm getting, even before anything else comes into it, like I said, big pan energy, for those who are into that. I'm not going to go too much into pan stuff because it's very complex, it's very... it can really go in either direction, depending on how you take it magically, right? I personally love pan, but it's a very easy energy to misinterpret or to use for ill. So we're not going to talk about that further, but for those who I'm saying pan to, you will know what pan's kind of big dick presence, big dick energy, pan pipe energy is signifying within this whole thing, right? I'm also thinking of the Pied Piper of Hamelin, right? Leading the rats and then the children into the mountain. And how this thing of leadership, if you don't channel it correctly, if you don't step out of this energy of like snippy little conflicts, could be something really quite dangerous in the wrong hands. You don't want to develop into the kind of person who only focuses on the tiny aspects of a thing and on who's being right and who's being wrong, because that kind of person will lead the children into the mountain, yeah? You want to be instead the kind of person who can lead with grace, with in-depth knowledge. And I know that the Pied Piper is a complex tale anyway, because the children are led, arguably, to teach the town a lesson. So it's like greater good trickstery stuff that we're getting into. Again, not stepping into that, but similar vibe to Pan. But what I will say is that if you don't channel yourself correctly in the direction of what would my mentors do, what would the people I look up to do, you're at great risk here of leading people down a kind of primrose path and then discovering that you're stuck yourself. So let's look into Piper, number 24, and see what the actual handbook has to say. To get what you want, the Piper recommends that you try polite requests and gentle, patient persuasion, and then wait quietly welcoming for it to come to you. That's also the other quality of a leader, and it's big in the Kings, and you've got two, is that you kind of just hold an energy whereby things will happen for you. Like, it's expected that the court will see to the requirements of the king, right? He doesn't need to keep nagging, he doesn't need to keep asking, because he's just a king. And they see him and they go, oh shit, that's the big guy, we'd better do our jobs. So there is that kind of, there's an allusion to kind of holding the space of that. And again, if that sounds too woo, I'm talking about that in a very social engineering sense. I'm talking about that in the sense of, you know, like Robert Greene's work and that kind of thing of stepping into a place where your engagement with others is so kind of seductive and powerful in its immediate impression that the people around you just kind of get stuff done. Yeah, they just understand that you're in charge. And you can step into that. We'll get into this in a minute. But you can become that energy before you're actually in a position of power or of leadership. And I think that's what you're being pushed to do. It's like, act like you're already your own boss. Act like you're already the person spying in on this. And if there was someone stood behind you looking over your shoulder, what would you be saying or doing? Would it be different? So seek harmony and tranquility in yourself and in the world around you. Use tenderness and gentleness. Instead of that brute force, the real king energy uses tenderness, right? This card speaks of a time of harmony, creativity and increasing order. It tells of communication without words, the music of empathy and the awareness of the feelings and concerns of others. It's a time to pay attention to the subtlety of others' expressions of feelings and ideas, but not so much attention that you lose yourself in it, right? Look past the surface and listen as you would to a beguiling melody on the very edge of hearing. He also plays melodies in our dreams, which may be filled with meaning and importance, and then leaves it up to us to understand what they mean. You may get insights from your dreams on this, whether or not you're a person who believes in that stuff. Just saying. This may be a good time to be aware that others may be listening to us with sensitivity and clarity, so much that they may hear what we are truly saying more clearly than we do ourselves. So look at how you're showing up. Look at what it is that you're actually projecting to this person by the things that you've said or disagreed with. Look at the implications of what it is that you suggested they change or they do, and what they interpret that as saying about you. And kind of be aware of that as your like persona, right? Be aware of what you're projecting and putting across. Not so much that you lose the idea of the project as a whole, but certainly enough that you can step into leadership. This card may also signify musical talent or ability, or it may be suggesting that the use of music is in some way important at the present time. So some of you are musicians and this is about a band. You're fighting with the band, right? Or with a producer or some kind of distribution thing. For some that will resonate, for some it won't, but even when we get out of this language of using music and we look at music symbolically, we're then talking about vibration. We're talking about the pattern of less perceived stuff that we put out into the world. We're talking about what people pick up about us or about our project or product before they actually have a conscious assessment. It may be that the stuff that you're fighting over is of that nature. I've mentioned colours a lot. I've mentioned types of stuff, right? It may be that you're saying like, oh, well, if we make it red, they'll instantly get this off it, and we don't want to do that. But, you know, if that is the case, that's another nudge to you as an individual to take this a little bit more holistically and to say, okay, what is it about the minutiae of how I'm presenting that gives off that same stuff? Or what is it that I'm afraid of giving off? Are you afraid of something coming off as too aggressive because you are yourself afraid of being too aggressive, or because you're perceived of as being aggressive by others? Are you afraid of something being like too diluted in its meaning, reaching kind of too many people, because that loses the beauty of why it was that you went into it? All of these things that you're saying about the thing you're making are also things that you can extrapolate to say about yourself, and you can learn a lot from doing so. And that is really how you tap into vibration, yeah? It's everything outside of me is affected by what I'm bringing in some fashion, is reflecting back to me something that I'm doing or believing or thinking or saying. Otherwise it would be a little bit like this or a little bit like that, you know? So, getting over back to this side, I hope I didn't just knock the camera. If you do take this action, if you do manage to kind of isolate yourself from all of this and go, this is bollocks, it's all surface stuff, it's all shallow, nitpicky stuff, I'm going to step into king energy, I'm going to be the piper. What will happen? So we've got the tower, so there will be crisis, right? This is not going to be immediately well received. You're not going to just transition from everybody fighting and bitching about each other to a state where everything's suddenly calm just because you've shifted your mindset. That doesn't mean that it's not a positive thing to do. I would still urge that you do shift it, that you do step into this energy, because the rewards are quite great as you sort of travel further along. But what this is here to say is a kind of immediate warning, in a similar way to Pile 1 again, that this process isn't going to be easy. If you do stop this engagement with this, it's not going to be like everything's just suddenly working out, okay? People will be offended. People might abandon ship. There might be a crisis that you didn't anticipate coming, represented by this lightning. There might be a kind of dethroning of the king, represented by a crown. There will be resistance to whatever it is that you're doing. It doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do. It just means that you have to go about it in the right way, not in a polarising way, not in a way that gets lost in emotion, not in a way that you wouldn't be proud of if someone was spying on you, and certainly not in a way that's obsessed with the micro instead of the macro, yeah? So this is just saying there are consequences to your actions. However you deal with this, there's going to be a bit of pushback, but you should still go with stop, because that was your traffic light, right? And then the eventual sort of outcomes of this become the position of the Hierophant, who is arguably one of the great leaders in the tarot. He is in a position where he has literal acolytes, right? That doesn't mean you're going to be a priest or a cult leader or something like that. It doesn't mean that you're going to have people worshipping at your feet, and I would urge you not to pursue this in the interest of just power for power's sake. But it does mean that in stepping into your correct energy and in balancing it for yourself and understanding that it's part of your purpose to understand this whole thing, you are going to be in a position of leadership at some stage. You are going to be the person calling the shots instead of having to fight with somebody else about how something's done. And then with this Knight of Swords, it's kind of a rushing in of energy, of appreciation from the spirit as well, because this horse, I don't know about you guys, but to me, it looks like he's grinning. It's like the inner self is super happy with what the outer self, the intellectual self, is doing. But there is a kind of, it can be impetuousness, but there's also a speediness to this. There's a gets the job done. There's a very Winston Wolfe energy, right? You're going to get a reputation for being the person who has the correct words instead of insufficient words, and who can lead instead of following or getting caught in other people's stuff, and who can rush in and kind of fix a situation or add to a product or add creative depth to something in a really satisfactory way, yeah? So, next stage we have your next step. King of Pentacles in the reverse. This is a tricky one. King of Pentacles is about your relationship to money, abundance. So if this is something that's earning you money or could potentially earn you money in the future, this is a potential call to suspend that aspect of the relationship. It could be that worrying about the money attached to this is preventing you from making the correct decision in a social sense. For those of you where money isn't attached, excuse me, hiccups again. I'm getting this as you sitting with king energy without quite executing it yet. So you're taking some time, even if you only have a 10-minute break in your workday or, a weekend before it all kicks in again or whatever. But you're taking a little bit of time out just to sit in the idea of, I am a king. I am a piper. King is genderless, by the way. If you're a woman watching this, it's no odds, right? It's still the same vibe, okay? So you're sitting in this thing of, if I accept this mantle of leadership, how does it feel? What's it like? What kind of clothes do I want to wear? What kind of foods do I want to eat if I'm a leader? What kind of shit do I come out with? What kind of movies do I watch, right? It's really having fun with this idea of, oh, if I was a king though, what happens then? Because I get the feeling that you haven't even really entertained this up until this point. You haven't thought enough about oh no, I am a leader, to be comfortable in that position. And to ruminate on why you might not have comfort with it, why you might have been in shadow leader energy. But yeah, so sit with that. Also sit with your relationship to money if money is involved in this. But it's asking you yes, king, but not yet. Step back from it just for a little bit. Hesitate just a little bit because you're going to have plenty of rushing and travelling energy, right? And you need to, lessen the J.K. Simmons bit and just kind of kick back. Even if it's just 10 minutes, if that's all you have, that's fine. A lunch break is groovy. Although I imagine if you only have 10 minutes, you're watching this in spaces anyway. But yeah, you're just settling into the idea of, I am the king of this castle. Not in a way that takes away from anybody else's rights or responsibilities, but just, I am comfortable in the position of leadership. What does that mean for me? What does that look like? And where would I like to go with it? And then in the position of something else that you can be focusing on right now, we've got the King of Swords. Now, this is very intellectual, it's very expressive. You've got a lot of sword stuff in this reading, so I suspect that your conflict thus far has been in the realm of words or of print or what to put out there in the description of a product or in the lyrics or whatever. And that's echoed again. It's all about communication again. But with this being the kind of thing that you do just to distract yourself from this whole thing and click into a different energy, I think that actually this isn't really about the king aspect, and it's not even really about the sword aspect. It's about an alternate meaning of the King of Swords, which is literal media. I think there is a program or a book or a series of books or a movie or just a creator of some kind, even in your field, maybe in music, maybe whatever, that is someone that you think of when I say leader, and particularly when I say king. For some of you, it may be the king, who knows? But I would invite you, as a distraction from all of this, to spend time in their creative output, because in the end this is a creative project. And just be in it, just sit with it. Don't use it to contemplate your situation at work, all of this kind of stuff. Don't focus on it. Let the process of osmosis, cultural osmosis happen, where you're king, that to me is Elvis, or that to me is Tom Waits, or that to me is Mike Patton, or that to me is this character in this show, or whatever, right? And you just immerse yourself for a little bit of recreational time in, I'm going to have them on while I make my eggs, or I'm going to watch this while I do this other thing, or at the gym today I'm going to listen to a podcast by this person that I see as a king, right? And in doing that, and in taking on this swordsy component of like the intake of creative thing as an intellectual exercise, or as an exercise in the mind and in receptivity and in delineation, right? You will kind of absorb, again by osmosis, the difference between this king and not king. You don't need to consciously pray on it or think about it, or, you know, God forbid you ruminate. But this is just to say, there is a king somewhere, and it will be kind of immediately self-evident when you hear this reading. Spend time with them, whoever that character or whatever is. It could even be a shadow king, but it's going to teach you in some way. Emperor also being a useful king variation archetype. It's going to give you the information that you need to continue at a subconscious level, because we've worked on the conscious. We know what you should be doing. We know what you shouldn't be focusing on. We know you need to stop engaging in the sort of finicky aspects of this. But to really get back into the creativity of it and the beauty of it, what you need to do is disengage from it mentally by doing something fun that is to do with a media that has Emperor energy. I'm also seeing the little butterfly in there, so it's or moth transformation. You know, this thing is going to have more of an influence on how much you change than is immediately evident in just like, oh, I'm watching Star Trek today, you know, or oh, today I'm going to watch all of the Halloween movies or whatever. Like, you do you in terms of time, inclination, etc. But yeah, that's what's going to really help. It's going to step you out of this and into, oh, I can handle this. I don't know why that helped, but it kind of did. There was one more thing I wanted to say. Oh yeah, just on that issue of change. King of Pentacles in reverse can be about change and resistance as well. So if you are starting to feel like there's some resistance to this archetype, or to letting this go, or you think the whole thing is like, yeah, it's trivial and it's bullshit, but I can't get it out of my head, really do pay attention to this final bit of advice for the King of Swords, and just step out of it. Put it the fuck down for a second, and you will be a better creator, a better maker, a better worker, a better social and professional leader than you were before you had a bit of downtime to just absorb something else. All right? So I hope that was useful. If you do want to book with me, the link's down below. If you don't, or you can't at the moment, but you want to give a bit of an energetic flow and thank you my way, there is also a PayPal donation button. Toss me 50p or a quid or something just to say like, hey, I see you. And if you can't or don't want to do that either, but you did enjoy this, please like, subscribe, ding the dong, thank you kindly. If it was of no relevance whatsoever, firstly, I'm surprised you're still here and there's something going on with that. But secondly, I'd appreciate you giving me feedback as to why that is. And as always, if it did resonate really strongly, information and stuff that you picked up on down in the comments, because I love hearing feedback. All right, take care. And finally, at the end of our journey, we come to discover pile 3. And that we had it all along. It's been a long ass one today, I'm not going to lie to you. Like, without doing my readings down, right, the traffic light basic is one of the simpler readings that I provide. And yet, these piles have been extremely long and very in-depth, and in some cases quite heavy. So, just, you know, be prepared. Pile 3. So we're gonna, oh, okay, I think that's our answer. So you have got a get ready light, which is nice because the other two have been stop, spoilers, but hey. And your keyword will be, not very easy to shuffle. What's this guy? This guy's calling at me. Travel. Ooh, okay. I'm already seeing theme. You don't need to be a psychic to see that one, but I am seeing it. Right, let's shuffle your cards. Okay, pile 3. Almost said pile 2 there. Get ready, you're about to dun, 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 travel. Preliminary thoughts, feelings, emotions. I was coming out with all kinds of weird shit as I was shuffling there. There is a childlike energy, not just to this deck, but to your cards in general. So that may become relevant as we get into it. I think it probably will, looking at the selection. I also was humming Dead by They Might Be Giants. Don't panic, doesn't mean a death. But there's a really great lyric in it that I always remember, that was the bit that came in, which is, now it's over, I'm dead and I haven't done anything that I want, or I'm still alive and there's nothing I want to do. It is about expired groceries, but it's also about the nature of existence. Highly recommend. Really great song. I might have it at my funeral, actually. Always good to have advanced planning. But yeah, that doesn't mean that it's any relationship to death, or that death plays a part in your reading. I get the feeling, actually, that it's more that there's an evaluation going on here about what it is that you do want to do. Is there anything you want to do? Is there anything that you regret that you didn't do? Should death, be meeting you at your doorway, our friend and sister, would you have regrets that you hadn't, say, gone to a certain place or done a certain thing? And that will come up. But it did just pop into my head at random, and I do hum songs as I shuffle, but they tend not to be what Brian Froud refers to as canned music. They tend to be just like intuitive hummings that help sort of lift the energy a little bit. So for me to get that song as specifically as I did, there's something in it. I may even link it down below if I remember. The other thing to say before I sit with your cards and we start proper is that I don't know if you've noticed the state of my nails, right? I'm not proud of this. You're making me show you. I don't want to show you. But so I applied metallic nails last night. I am in the habit of having metallic nails. I do reuse them. I try and make it biodegradable, etc. But, that's no odds. The point is that I used a new kind and they should be silver. And within the course of one day, they are now white, as you can see in many places. Now, I haven't done them any differently. I haven't put anything on them that I shouldn't have. But there is a sense of lightening up with this. There is a sense of silver turning into white. It may even be that for some of you, you're getting a few grey hairs, or that the ones that were silver and a little bit ambiguous are now turning bright white. And there's a sense of urgency in relationship to travel about that, and that's what's coming up with the song. But anyway, I just thought it was significant because I haven't really noticed it in the other readings. I have in this one. So I'm going to sit with your cards for a little bit and just kind of take in what's going on, and then we'll talk about it. I'm back. Okay, so the other readings were very long, very nuanced. Mercifully, from the perspective of time, I don't think this is. I think when we talk about travel as your accenting word, I think it's also a very straightforward reading that is about a journey. And I think it's saying get ready because you're going to travel. I also think that this is a trip that is leisure, not, necessarily work or, God forbid, sort of being forced out and having to move somewhere. But I do think there's an urgency to, excuse me, and my squeaky chair, there's an urgency to kind of when you go, right? There's a lot of swift wands and swords energy in this reading. There's a lot of immediacy. I'm sort of... the thing that I heard in my head as I was shuffling was like, come on! Oh, there's a hidden card. Wow. Okay, I completely missed that. Oh, yeah. Right. The hidden card that we had was Mercury. In reverse, so not mind, right? Not the traditional meaning of this. Mercury is the fastest motherfucker in the I was going to say the zodiac, in the, kingdom of the planets, if you like. So it does again speak to that swiftness. There may be some Egyptian link for some of you. Maybe that's where you want to go. I'm also feeling strongly Persia because of some of the mythological stuff going on down here, and Japan because of here. But it could be anywhere, and I am noticing that the temperature has really, really dropped in my house since I started this one. So I suspect it's somewhere warmer than where you are. But yeah, there's an energy of immediacy and swiftness, of like, plan this trip now. And just knowing what I know about the state of the world, and knowing what only a person in divination knows about how that might progress, I would say if you're going to get some travelling done, great to do it just in the next year or so, right? Great to do it as soon as you can, if money allows. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean it's overseas travel, it's just that I'm speaking to a great deal of you, so for many of you it will be, because you're used to taking holidays and stuff. For those of us like me who aren't made of money, this could very easily be travel within the country that you're in. It could be like a road trip or just a fun weekend somewhere. Or even just travel around your city, but in a different way to the fashion that you've experienced it thus far. Although I do get, I am sort of inclined to say that it's travel a little bit further afield than that, just because there's a lot of emphasis on planning and whether or not you do plan for this trip and how it's going to go based on that. So I was quite right in the shuffling about the childlike energy. There is a lot of stuff actually represented in the meaning of the cards and in some of your clarifiers that reflects that childlike enthusiasm, but also the quality in children to be a little bit underprepared for what's about to happen to them. And obviously we have the overall traffic light message of get ready, and it's quite literally, no, do be prepared though. Actually get ready for this. Don't just plan to go, like be ready to go. Have everything in place that you need to be in place before you set off. For example, there is a little bit of danger of being ill-prepared and insufficiently packed. That's coming through quite a bit. Okay, so what is this in relationship to? Let's break it down. So you've got the Six of Cups, which indicates a friendship or a childlike or childhood connection. Maybe even a past life thing for those of you who believe in that. I'm not really sure where I stand on it myself, but if you feel that connection with somebody, it's likely we're talking about them. I think that you're going to travel with somebody, and I think that they're either your family that you were kind of raised by, or chosen family that have that childlike connection with you, that have that fair exchange of the beautiful and better things in life, right? There is a crow on this, and I'm sort of hearing the phrase, as the crow flies. Crow is about mirth, amongst other things. I know he is about death, and I know he can be super serial, but in this vibe that we've got, I don't think it's that, right? I think it's this aspect of crow as trickster figure, as fucking you up along your way to make things a bit more fun because you have to improvise, as collecting the shinies of the world, as flying to the top of that mountain because he doesn't have to climb it because he's a crow, and then laughing about it in crow fashion as everyone else tries to clamber up. It even makes me think of the wonderful videos online of a castle that I can only assume is local to me, because the crows have listened to passers-by and taught themselves to say, "Are you alright, love? I'm alright. Are you alright?" Which is a very north of England kind of thing. But yeah, there's that sense of like mimicry, mockery in the positive sense. Having a jibe with this person, being able to laugh at each other and indeed yourselves when you're around each other, and the kind of trust that happens with that level of mirth. And then also from the expression, as the crow flies, this is somebody you have a very straight line, straightforward relationship with. It's not complicated by what's going on around you. It's not meandered. Whether or not it's been intermittent over the years, it's very kind of along the straight and narrow. It's very pure and easy to understand from both of your perspectives. So again, I am getting, for most of you, the sense of a childhood friend, maybe who you came up through school and college and whatever else with, who you're going to have a bit of a journey with, right? And it is explicitly travel to this mountain because of all the sort of hot and cold elements, because all kinds of stuff that pings for me as, this is about journey, right? Nine of Swords in the reverse is the end of anxieties. So this is either that both of you have been having a bit of a rough time and you just want to chill out, want to take a break, or that this trip will kind of relieve some of the tensions that you have been experiencing. Particularly familial ones, because I'm noticing this crying family at her feet, and she's very calm and chill, and she's risen above it. Again, not gendered, but it's this idea that your kind of inner archetype is rising above whatever family bullshit is going on for either of you, and instead going, you know what, I'm going to have this trip with my friend, I'm going to really indulge and enjoy, and I'm going to kind of be in my own world as I am. I'm noticing like temple incense smoke as well. Don't know whether they're candle smoke or... I'm not even sure of the myth of this particular card. If anyone knows down below, please feel free to elaborate if it's relevant. But I wasn't called to look up the myth for this particular one. And I do think smokiness is... Whether that's like leaving a smoke-filled environment or visiting temples, or that you guys like to smoke together, or something along those lines, but that's coming into the kind of relief of this tension. You're no longer losing sleep, you're no longer anxious, you're no longer in a wound-up state, you're instead taking a break. So this is a recreational holiday, and it's very intentional on both of your parts, whether or not it's spontaneous. I actually feel from some of the other cards it might be like on a whim. May even be that this reading gives you the idea to go and travel with your friend, in which case great stuff. I'm glad I did some good in that sense. But whether or not it's planned, it is it's gonna lift the energy for both of you, and that is something that you've both put kind of stock in, right? You've both got high stakes environments that you're leaving to do this. It's very Thelma and Louise, right? Two of Swords in reverse is the end of indecision. And again, we're getting lots of fiery energy, so it's this kind of quick, creative, impulsive, childlike cardinal, for those of you who are perhaps friends with cardinal signs and a cardinal yourself. But it's very fast energy, it's very dynamic, vibrant. It's interested in the creative nuance of things, not so much a historical trip, not so much a trip with like lots of physical exertions and deep ponderings and meeting people at their diplomatic level. No, this is just like you're sightseeing, you're doing cool shit, you're having fun, you're indulging, and it's very fiery, very spontaneous, very like, oh, what should we do now? I don't care. We don't have an itinerary. High five. It's just like I got a Bill and Ted in my head doing the kind of air guitar thing at each other. It's like, yeah, whatever happens is excellent. Whatever, party on. So yeah, it's going to be very quick. It's going to be very kind of inspired to lift you out of this state that either one of you or both of you have been in, which is potentially provoked by some family stuff. And it's gonna, it's just going to be like fast release, right? So that you can get back into the headspace of your dreams and what you want and your creativity. I don't even know what this is in the background, but I read it as like calligraphy and street art. Oh, it's many-headed dragon. Cool. But yeah, I saw that as graffiti in like Istanbul or somewhere. So that may resonate for some of you. But anyway. Okay, moving along, and sorry about my squeaky chair. So if you don't do this, what's likely to happen? That's these three here. King of Wands. This is, generally speaking, an overbearing character, perhaps a fatherly energy, or somebody that likes to think they have a fatherly energy and actually just wants to be the boss. This is somebody extremely, it's like dictatory, right? It's also because it's wands, it can be quite sort of fiery, burning up, conflicty. So there are two interpretations of this. One of them is that I get that either one of you is suffering in a family dynamic from somebody male and very oppressive that would be, excuse me, hiccups are one of my signs, would be kind of even more of an influence on either one of you. If this trip was not taken, they'd be getting to a burning point, if you like. The Firebird is, I know it's not actually in the Russian version in this particular, the card inspiration was not the Russian one, but I'm the most familiar with the Russian incarnations of Firebird. And as well as being a character, it tends to be a catalyst within the tale. So any story with the Firebird in it is going to have dramatic transformations happening for everybody involved, just as a result of it kind of being incidental to one of the characters. Doesn't matter whether they even meet it, right? So whoever this Firebird is for either one of you, or for a group of you, if it's a family trip or whatever, it's going to be that if you don't take this journey, they're going to have more of an influence than they rightly should. But if you do, they can be the catalyst for all kinds of wonderful things and blessings and gifts. A lot of the Firebird tales end up with people with vast fortunes and all kinds of new magical abilities and things like that. So, yeah, I would really say that, the reason to get ready is that if you don't prepare adequately for this trip, and God forbid it doesn't happen, this person's influence is going to be a little bit out of hand for either one of you in a way that the other one can't necessarily control. Getting to the lighter end of why to get ready, this three of coins and Page of Wands are both kind of getting at the same thing. You'll see that they're both very childlike, happy figures. You'll see they're both kind of smiling, lost in their own world. That's a theme. Lost in your own world is big in this reading. You might be someone who's been affectionately called a space cadet in the past. Same. How you doing? But in this particular instance, I get the feeling that this person is travelling with the other two in a collaborative effort that Three of Coins describes. But the other two have particularly sour faces, right? And you can see that this person is extremely happy with themselves. Similarly, over here, you see that this person is happy as Larry and they're waving around what is a giant fly swatter in the story. But that kind of all is not well in the Page of Wands energy all the time, right? It's a card that describes somebody that's perhaps a little bit infantile sometimes, or ill-prepared, or a little bit too spontaneous, and might just kind of whiz in there and be all creative and, hey, how you doing, before they really know what's actually going on. And I think both of these together talk about somebody who, if they're not adequately prepared for the idea that they are about to travel, might piss off the people they're travelling with the lack of preparation that they have, might forget some things, maybe not pack their passport, maybe just not be prepared in terms of the correct clothing types, etc., and that will be an issue for the people that they're travelling with or around. And that they're quite happy, they feel pretty good about all of this. But they're kind of looking in the wrong direction, right? They're not looking to the journey. They're not even looking to the Firebird and losing the influence of the Firebird energy. They're either in their own world to the point where they've got their eyes closed and they don't know where they're going. Another lack of planning kind of a thing is literally not knowing where you're going or where you're staying. And this one's kind of looking off into another distance. There's stuff with the fairies, like, yeah, it doesn't matter. It's just a spontaneous trip. We don't need to plan for it, right? I'm here to tell you that you definitely do. Particularly for those of you planning to go somewhere warm, there is a nod with this fly swatter thing as well to pack your bug spray, yeah? Because Because if you become like a colony under the time that you're there, like if you're just absolutely swarming and you're like, hey man, I don't care, you might care the day after, right? Or in the coming weeks or whatever. Or the people around you might care that there is no bug spray and it was your job to pack it. So it's just a little nod. I know it's really specific, but with the fly swatter being there and with the overall meaning, fucking pack your passport, dude. Pack your bug spray. Like, make sure that you're prepared with the right kind of clothes. Make sure you're wearing shoes and that you've packed the kind of shoes that you're not wearing on the actual journey, yeah? Because they're both barefoot. You don't want to end up, like, having your travelling shoes and then getting there and finding you don't have anything else. But it's all right. Look at me, I'm happy. I'm a page. Like, I really admire this ability to just SpongeBob your way out of everything. Just paint a rainbow wherever you go. It's all kind of cool. But other people around you may not admire it quite so much, you follow me? So just make sure that you do the adequate checking. If you're of like an ADD or ADHD personality type, please make sure that you make a list before you go and that you check that list twice. That's no shade, by the way. I hold many of those traits myself for other neurodivergent reasons. But yeah, just make sure that you got it all together, yeah? This is a very light-hearted thing of why to get ready. It is generally a lovely and light-hearted reading, but there are some specifics to it. And I get the feeling that if you're not adequately prepared, in terms of who you're with or around, even just like on the coach or something, this could turn a bit nasty fast, right? There's also, and this is just for some of you, with this King of Wands and what I said about Firebird and Catalyst and this kind of martial element to the flames, there could be the thing that if you don't get ready, you will be travelling in a time where there is more conflict in a place than you anticipated, particularly with the way the world is, or where there's political stuff going off that you don't want to be a part of, shady authoritarian energy. Like I said, dictator energy is the King of Wands in the shadow. In the light, he's very leonic, he's very expressive. You've got that coming up elsewhere, that's great stuff. But in the shadow, it's somebody that you don't want to cross. So equally, when you're thinking about where you're going and you're talking it through with your friend, think about what's going on politically in that place. Think about what kinds of things would or would not piss off people religiously or annoy the police there or all these kinds of things. Because there is something about an authority figure in here that plays into whether or not you're prepared. It could be as simple as your dad shouting you as you run to the car that you've forgotten your shoes. It could be as complex as this is a country which is about to join in what is becoming war, right? So do sort of take that with a pinch of salt, depending on where it is that you think you might be going or you feel you might be going. But it would be remiss of me not to mention it if I'm getting it, yeah? And I don't want to scare anybody. There is nothing about this trip that connotes disaster or, misfortune or anything like that. But there is an obvious focus to be prepared, yeah? So just make sure you do your research, etc. Okay, so influences on the current dynamic. So we've got Neptune here, which is very much about dreaming up new ideas for the self and others. It's about daydreaming, about where you might want to go. This for me is like Instagram and Pinterest boards of travel stuff. It's listening to travel diaries, reading them, watching travel vlogs, that kind of stuff to get yourself geared up for the idea of going if you don't know where you're going. And if you do, it's daydreaming about it with more of a kind of focus, like what is it that you want to get out of the trip? What are your highest dreams, hopes, aspirations for you and your fellow traveller in the situation that you're travelling to? Because Neptune is always about what's going on inside your head and inside the psyche in a more unconscious sense. So it's bringing those unconscious desires, perhaps of the places you might like to go in a bucket list sense, up to the surface. It's dredging them up from the water, the Neptunian oceanic element, up to the surface of cognition to go, yes, I picked that one, or I recognise that this thing is why it's this place in particular. That may be something you want to do in discussion with the person you're travelling with as well. And that may be where sacrifice comes in, because you're not going to agree completely on which bits of a place you want to see, or even maybe where you want to go. It might be that you have the idea of who this person is, and you're like, yes, travelling with them is such a great idea. Let's start prepping that, or let's start saving for that, or whatever. But you have no idea where it is that you want to go. And then when they cross an idea off your list, you're kind of hurt by it. But there is this sacrificial element of like, make sure that you're preparing in a way that is best for you both, and not just for how you're feeling at the moment. Actually, if you are travelling with someone in a friendship or relationship capacity and they're open to readings like this, it may even be useful to get them to watch the reading with you, and to kind of discuss after that where you're going to go, what kinds of things you want to see, what it's important that you pack and prep, where you've sort of fallen short with that stuff before perhaps, and just like your aims for the trip, because I get the sense that this is not just a journey in terms of a light holiday. This is going to be really transformative and inspirational and creatively fulfilling for both of you. And there are going to be elements of it that are quite spontaneous. So having a goal in mind when you're travelling together, and being able to refer to that goal when you say, I want to turn left down this street and I can't explain why, but it's to do with, this exhibition or seeing this in a window or whatever. Like if you're on the same wavelength with each other about why it is that you're going where you're going, it's going to be easier to have those spontaneous and indeed synchronistic experiences if you're of that kind of inclination as well. Fifth house, creativity. This is pretty straightforward. The fun house may mean that you're like visiting a carnival or something in particular. For those of you who are closer to home, this may be a trip to the fun fair, or like staying with a circus or doing circus school type stuff. But there is, aside from the imagery, fifth house is again this Leo, this fiery, this spontaneous element, and also the element of like expressing yourselves in your truest nature, which I think with all the childlike energy and all the purity in your friendship or your relationship as is going to be much easier to tap into. You're not travelling with somebody who's going to judge you or who's going to influence which self you present, or, like just on a base level, like they're not going to be the sort of person where you're worrying about what you're going to wear or how drunk you can get, or whether they'll be pissed off if you suggest that you visit such and such a museum or whatever. Like it's not going to have that kind of tension to it because of who it's with. So you are going to be allowed to be creative and spontaneous, and that is really being encouraged in this. Okay, let's get to your fairy cards. So we've got the Singer of Courage, which is an 8, again echoing strength, Leonic energy, expression, fifth house stuff. But we've got it in reverse, so I'm just going to take a sneaky look at this. My feeling immediately is that like you're not feeling so courageous about the idea of travel, and that could be because of political stuff, it could be because of whatever this tension is that's going on at home, or it could just be because of like the state of the world post-pandemic. I know I have that anxiety also, but overall in the spread you are asked to step forward beyond that. It really is the right time, okay? And the reason that you're getting a get ready now is kind of so that you can let that idea settle in and you can be comfortable with the idea of travelling again, and with, travelling with whom you're going, and being prepared enough. So don't fear is what I'm getting. Like courage in its opposition is fear. This needn't be a fear-based thing at all. It's going to go fine. It's going to really fulfill you. It's going to bring you back to yourself and lift you out of anxiety. But you need to shift into the energy that when you're thinking about it, you're not catastrophizing or thinking about things that could potentially go wrong. Bravery, sublimation of fear and moral strength. And in its reversed, it says, when the song of courage has grown faint and we feel overcome by fear and self-doubt, the questions we need to ask ourselves begin with, what am I really afraid of? Quite often, deep soul searching enables us to discover that our true fears are hidden behind our false fears. It is impossible to face false fears because they are merely shapeshifters and shadows without substance. Notice the masks up here, that's about shapeshifting. Continually changing form. Facing a real fear is much easier because it doesn't keep changing the rules and moving the goalposts. The question then becomes, what can I do to open my heart to courage so that when I feel fear, I can follow through on what I want and need to do? You want and need this trip, my dude. You absolutely do. And what's more is, you deserve it. It's going to be really beneficial for you and everyone around you for you to go and do this. So if you are trapped in fear, and particularly if there's a place that you're afraid to go, I would go there, yeah? Like, within means, obviously, like. But, you know, if you've had an irrational fear of travelling to a certain place because it's busy or because there's a certain aspect of it that's intimidating to you, but you're kind of intrigued by it and curious, this is your trip, right? This is the time to travel to it now. So as an Oracle group member in Froude's group wisely suggests, another question to ask is, what else is present? When fear of any kind arises in the mind, more space is allowed in the heart if one acknowledges the fear, while at the same time looking for whatever else besides the fear is also there. Thus one neither ignores nor gives too much focus to the fear itself, and more space opens up within which the fear can be explored and liberated. A few things coming through with that. Firstly, I want to acknowledge that my voice was kind of cracking there. You'll notice that I'm husky anyway, and that was because as a child I had long times on ventilators, so my vocal cords were a little bit ripped. But even more so, this is like throat chakra stuff, so this is blocked expression. It's almost like part of the thing you're afraid of is saying you want to go in the first place. It's do I deserve this, or will the people around me be all right with it? Or can I afford it? And making the leap beyond that thing to go, yes, no, I'm going. It's like you can't express the desire to go in the first place. So that's why throat's acting up. Also in the fact that in order to point that out, I was talking about, you know, disability and health problems and stuff. It may be for some of you that there is a genuine concern about something like health insurance while you're away, or what happens if you contract something while you're there, or if, you know, health problems that are existing go wrong or something like that. That's not to say that that will happen. There is nothing in your reading to indicate that it will. But what I'm saying is that it's a fear you might have about travel. Whenever I'm drawn to something in my own body that's blocked or crackly or going wrong a bit, it's like alerting me to my own fears about health. It's not necessarily that those things are going badly. It's that I'm in an energy of ruminating on them. So this courage issue might actually be to do with, am I well enough to go, or will I stay well, or can I afford to pay for health insurance if, you know, if anything happened from a knee graze to malaria, right, would I be able to pay for that? And the answer that you're overwhelmingly being given in this childlike, heart-opening, trusting, spontaneous energy of this reading, which is frankly lovely to channel, is yes, you are ready now, it's going to be okay. But part of the reason you're being told to be prepared is to get into that trust, right? That it can be okay, you can travel, you can be all right with it. It can go all right. So for your kind of advice and guidance, we've got take advice, which is interesting. So this is either like, no, really listen to me, listen to this reading. Or it could be that in order to assuage these fears or to be better prepared in a practical sense, you might want to speak to somebody who's a little bit more informed about your health, about the place that you specifically want to travel to, or about any concerns you might have about managing travel. Because, you know, we live in an able-bodied, insta-flexing world where it's easy to forget that holidays are a big deal for a big section of the population. Be that because of anxieties or health problems or history with bad things that happened when they travelled, all kinds of broad spectrum stuff as to why people don't take holidays, right? And if that's you, this is your nod that, all right, we acknowledge that, we see that, that's fair enough and it's cool. And not everybody can travel willy-nilly. You know, that's not a reality of the world the way it's portrayed as a reality in some circles. But what's being said here is that if you take good advice from somebody, it can be made possible, it can be rendered possible for you, or indeed for your friend, depending on whether or not you're sort of concerned for them, right? It may even be that you're concerned about angering this Firebird character should you drag them away from the familial sphere, in which case the nod is to take advice about how it is that you would handle that in a social sense. There is something about speaking and communicating here, because I'm seeing the projection of the words over the character. So it is like advice about either a written document or how it is that you're going to express something, right? Hopefully that'll hone it in for some of you. But yeah, take advice before you go. That's part of being adequately prepared. And it's just good advice to take advice, right? But for those of you who are resistant to this reading as a whole, because you think, well, I couldn't possibly travel now, not with what's going on in the world, or I couldn't possibly travel, I don't have the money, or I couldn't possibly travel, I have all these health problems and it's a real ball ache to do. I see you, I accept all of those problems, but I call bullshit for this particular journey. This is something you're meant to be doing, somewhere you're meant to be going, and the way will open up for you because it's something that you're meant to do. I know that I said when I was singing the song in the shuffle that it wasn't about literal death, but for some of you who may have ties to someone sort of distantly with quite a bit of money, there may be not death but inheritance stuff that comes in that makes it possible for you to travel. And my stomach's rumbling, so I know that's correct for somebody out there. So if it is that you have fears about money or your capability to just go on holiday, like how would that even happen, then some of this is like, no, the way will be paved and it'll be in unexpected fashions. You know, your partner could have somebody that's a third or fourth cousin pass away and leave them a load of money. You just don't know, right? And that's not to freak any of you out. I'm not fortune-telling portentous of death somewhere. I'm just saying that the variety of ways in which things can open up for you if you're meant to do something are really surprising. But what you need to do is let go of the control over that and let go of the lack of faith that will happen for you, and just accept that, like, no, I'm going. I'm planning it now. It doesn't matter how I get to that point where it's feasible. That will open up for me through circumstances I don't yet understand. What's more important is that I speak with my travel companion about where it is that we're going and what it is that we want to do there and how fun it's going to be. And I dream a little bit, this Neptunian dreaming, this mercurial communication and mind emphasis, this creativity. It's all about, like, discussing with somebody you trust, like, what does it look like if I get to go there? What's that daydream like? What could we do? And again, with the kind of Pinterest assembly of ideas about where to go and stuff, that could be really beneficial in terms of just taking yourself on a bit of an imaginative jaunt and being like, well, if I go here, I'll sample this food and then I'll visit this place and then we'll do this. Whereas if I go here, I would do this thing instead. And that may hone in, like, where it is that's really appropriate for you to take this kind of, I want to say magical journey at this point, because it's going to be really transformative or really restorative at the very least. So moving over to this end of stuff, I'm not going to move again because my chair is super squeaky. But yeah, this is what happens if you do take the action, if you don't ignore the advice to get ready, if you do your adequate prep and you take advice and you discuss it with your travel companion, even if that companion is a furry friend, by the way, that's completely cool as well. And we can often have these straightforward relationships with our animal companions. So for those of you who are like, no, forever alone, I'm not travelling with anybody, that may be your fear. It may be your block. And it may be like, okay, well, can I take my dog? You know, can I take my budgie? I don't know how feasible that is, but I was bold to say it. So yeah, what happens if you do go with this? Okay, so Knight of Swords in reverse. So you're not going to be rushing into things as much. You're not going to be making mistakes because you're not going to be letting things run away with you. This speaks to the spontaneity in terms of packing and planning that I talked about earlier. Excuse me, another hiccup. Wow. All right. Anyway, sorry about that. So yeah, this speaks to also a lack of rumination, because swords can be that going over things intellectually. Should I, could I, would I? What about this thing? What about that thing? If you do prepare adequately, you're going to worry less, is the short answer for this. And you're going to be less impulsive, which means that you are going to be practically able to do the travelling that you want to do. The Fool in reverse, the straightforward interpretation is it's going to be less foolish. You're not going to make silly mistakes. You're not going to leave your passport at home and discover that at the airport. You're not going to leave your shoes in the bag at your gym. You know, all of these things I was asking you to pay attention to. This really is a very straightforward, very kind of down-to-earth reading in that sense. It's just, you're not going to fuck up in those ways. And the Fool in reverse as well can be kind of the perception of somebody as a madman when they're actually a sacred fool. So for some of you, this is going to be like, you're going to sound a bit nuts talking about this trip to other people. You may have naysayers around you, particularly in close quarters, who are like, nah, this isn't going to be possible for you, or you're just talking shit, or why would you go there, or like, great, another holiday, so what? But I encourage you to step into the childlike spirit of enthusiasm and to continue chatting about it and waxing lyrical about it, daydreaming, feeling excited, because that is this reverse Fool energy as well. It's like, you can all perceive me as mad, that's fine. I'm going to get so much out of this journey. It's going to be amazing. And I promise you it will. And then the last part of this, the Ace of Swords, this is about truth. It's about reaching revelation, particularly on an intellectual and personal level. It's about getting to the crux of the matter. It may be that stuff comes up while you're travelling or on your journey that it didn't even occur to you to sort of think about or to try and delve deeper into. You know, like it's almost like you're getting answers without even looking for the questions particularly, just because you're in this new environment and it's got that refreshing quality where everything's new, everything's spontaneous, everything's synchronistic, and you're allowed to just go on this kind of magical derive through a new city and be guided by fate as to what street you turn next, and see incredible, beautiful things as a result that click in with you and make you go, when I get home, I'm going to change that thing, or this person has been dragging me down, or this job, or whatever. Like, it's going to be a time of revelation for you, whether or not you go in with that intention explicitly, or you go to your trip with, like, a question. You're going to get answers from it. And also with the knots and the plants growing through the knots, there's some kind of emotional ties that bind here. It may be related to this, it may be related to your Firebird, or to something to do with your friend's life, or whatever, but there is something within the emotional sphere which is tangled up, which is knotted. I actually got that metaphor in another card. I think it was in pile 2, so if you're drawn to a couple of piles, that might be for you as well. But there really is a cutting of those ties. It's like you don't even need to unpick the emotional knotwork. You're not needing to take this deeply draining therapeutic deep dive into your emotions. It's just going to be that this trip cuts through the shit. It's just going to like unknot that for you, and you're going to return home refreshed, which in the end is what we want from a holiday, right? Okay, so the next step for you, the moon. This is an interesting one because I wouldn't ever really take it as a guidance card had it not fallen into this position. We can see that it's the princess, I'm going to mispronounce this, I can feel it, Kagua. I hope I'm not butchering that. I'm really sorry to my Japanese viewers and friends out there. But yeah, so if you're familiar with that story, that might be significant as well, or Japan as a place might enter into this quite heavily. But this card in particular, the raccoons are kind of gazing into the illusory moon and the correct moon, as in what is true for you and what is not true for you. And it's interesting that because of the confines of this table, I've put this position, which would be kind of somewhere over here or around here, stood by itself, over the top of this Singer of Courage. So it's almost like saying, this fear that you have is the illusory moon. You don't need to be staring and focusing and concentrating on that. The other thing to know about this is that the next step, in a way, is wildness, right? The moon speaks to our wolf selves, to our, it's the women who run with the wolves, howling self. If that sounds really woo and cringy to you, it's just the self that is a little bit more spontaneous, that goes with the flow, that just does things on a whim, and they kind of tend to be right in this like big Jupiter energy kind of a way. And you're asked to step into that and to be a little bit wild with your choices and to just kind of go with it and be like, yeah, I'm going and this is where I'm going, and I don't need to explain to you all why. I don't need to step into practical yet. The practical prep will come, but this is about just diving into the realm of ideas, really, which is also very to do with the moon, and just looking at inspirational travel stuff. Again, Pinterest, travel journals, travel vlogs, blah, 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 to discern what is like real for you and what is not, i.e. which places appeal to you at a core level and which you think, well, that's nice if you've got this money or this interest or whatever, but it's not really where I'd choose to go. I want you to hone in on where you would absolutely love to be. That's what's screaming out from all of this in this reading, this inner child energy of like, you want to go to fill in the blank, and you're going. It's just, it just is. I don't know how you're going, I don't know when you're going, but I know you need to get ready starting now. Okay, so in the final position we've got something else to focus on, which is this King of Swords in reverse. So King of Swords can be media, it can be intellect, it can be, again, rumination, focus on a particular thing. And I believe this is like the phoenix, the griffin. So that may be, for those of you of Persian descent or who are familiar with that tale, that might be relevant as well. Or Persia might be relevant to like the places that you're looking at and stuff. But I really get with this King reversed, it's like, don't think too hard, feel, because these are almost acting as counterparts to each other. It's like you're stepping into the realm of illusion, you're giving yourself permission to be in social media, where it's all very sort of masked and illusory and misty, to be in daydreaming, to be in literal dreaming. If you're dreaming of a place, write down everything you can about that. On that, I had really specific instruction to go not to a state in America, not to a city within that state, not to a district within that city, but to a fucking building, an apartment building in America, as part of my spiritual journey. And that instruction was given to me in someone shouting me awake from a dream with 2 words, which I'm not going to repeat here because you'll know where it is. But let's just say that they weren't obvious or connected in any way. And to my conscious mind, I'd never fucking heard of this place. Although when I looked it up, the apartments were very much in the style of something from a bygone era that I'm into, and they reminded me of something else, and it was all very synchronistic. But, all of that is to say that like one of those words wasn't even a name or a noun. It was just like a nonsense word. And it was shouted at me, and I knew that I had to go. And there's been a very big journey of dreaming about how it is that I'll get to this place and what I might do there ever since, watching films that are set there, watching documentaries about the building itself and its inhabitants, and kind of the natural and man-made things nearby, how it relates to skate culture, all this like incredibly intricate stuff, just from 2 random nonsense words that came from a dream. I assure you it is possible to receive instruction in that fashion. The only way that you kind of get to it is not by being magical or psychic or special in any particular way. it's by being open to it and by being willing to write down 2 nonsense words after you wake up, because someone shouted them, so they must be important, right? And I'll look them up on Google later. And by heck, was I shocked when I did. So anything like that where you're getting intuitive nudges, you're in this moon realm that is really good, and you're moving away from this King of Swords intellect stuff, it's, you know, it's the reversal of that energy. So it's not something else to focus on, it's like a place to bring the focus that you might have brought to being analytical about this. And instead you're shifting that into, how can I daydream more effectively about where it is that I want to travel next, who it is that I want to go with, what we might get out of it, what we might see. And then later you can deal with combating fears around it, taking advice, and prepping and packing in a really responsible and adult way. Okay? So I hope that was helpful to you. If it was, and you'd like to book with me, the link is down below. If you don't have the funds for that right now because you're saving in your travel jar, or you're just not inclined to get another reading from me at the moment, but you did find it really useful, I appreciate tips. 50p is fine, a quid is fine. The PayPal link is down below. And if you don't want to give money in that sense, or you can't afford that exchange or whatever at the moment, I appreciate you being here. I do urge you to like and click subscribe if you'd like more content like this, or recommend me to friends, particularly friends or family that you think you might take this journey with, who might also benefit from this reading. So lots of love to you. I really hope this trip is absolutely banging. I think it will be, looking at these cards. Please let me know in the comments if you come back to this, having decided where to go, or having been on that journey. Tell me what it was like. Honestly, I'd love to know. I'm actually looking at doing some travelling and stuff myself, all being well, within the next year or so. So any recommendations as well that are pertinent to what's come up here, please let me know. Alright, take care. Alright, pile 3. If you're watching this, you know better than I do that midway through your reading, that camera just leapt off the thing and was hanging off the tripod by a bit of a thread. So I do apologise about that. If you had to receive a still frame and a bit of a caption from me, then, you know, I'm sorry that that occurred and that I wasn't aware of it. But all things bear... it's not bear. All things are appropriate to interpret when one is engaged in the reading process already. So for me, this is like an extra thing. If you're staying to the end, fully Ferris Buellering it, go home. But if you're seeing this, and this last reading was particularly relevant for you, there is this thing of like, you're hanging on by a thread in your current circumstances. This 9 of Swords card over here, it's really time now to go. And if you're already in the energy that you are actually able to travel at the moment, you have the means, and you can just up and leave tomorrow, do it, dude. Emergency, do it. Because the sooner that you prepare for it, and the sooner that you do it, emphasis on prepare because of the traffic light, the better your life as an overall picture will look. And that will differ for each of you, but let's just say it's pretty important, all right? So, yeah, I'm sorry about that, but I do think it's relevant, and I'll see you around the bend.